I now call this meeting of the Davenport Community School District Board of Directors to order. School board meetings are now open to the public, but the district will comply with the Iowa Department of Public Health and the governor's recommendation as to gatherings and social distancing. To comply with the 6-foot social distancing directive, the boardroom has been arranged to allow for 6 feet between attendees. This, however, has resulted in a limit being placed on the number of individuals from the public who may attend in person. Capacity of the room to allow for social distancing is 30 members of the public. Masks are required to be worn in the boardroom, but you may remove your mask if you speak. As with prior board meetings, you may access the board meeting remotely as well. Director Hayes, would you please read the board priorities?
Yes, I'll be happy to. The Davenport School Board establishes the following priorities to ensure the academic success of all students: to provide leadership and direction, to improve the overall learning environment of our classrooms, schools, and district, including the health, safety, and security and happiness of students and staff, to direct and support actions, programs, and activities which reduce the impact of poverty on our students, their families, and our community.
Director Snyder, would you please read the mission and vision statements?
Mr. President, I'm going to delegate that to Ms. Sloat and Ms. Heller if they would like to, if they have it up.
I can certainly try.
The mission statement is to enhance each student's abilities by providing a quality education enriched by our diverse community.
And the vision statement is education that challenges conventional thinking, prepares all students to compete in a global society, and inspires our students, parents, staff, and community to answer the question, what if?
Student board reports. I will turn that over to you, Superintendent Schneckloff.
Go ahead, guys.
All right, so my name's Sophia. I'm from Davenport North. I just wanted to say it's really good to be back in person. I know that everyone at the schools, students and teachers, are just so glad to be back in person. So at North, our Intro to Ed class has started their observations at Harrison. So that's a chance where students get to go and help a teacher at the younger grade levels and experience what teaching is actually like for people in the district. The Davenport North Choir plans on caroling this year. The specifics are unknown yet, but they do plan on doing it. We're excited for another great basketball season. We hope to make it to state again. Go Wildcats. The drama department is planning an online event on the 16th to boost club morale. And then the National Honor Society has planned an online ceremony for their inductees. We all recorded it this weekend, and it should be up soon. And then my closing statement is just I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy.
Thank you.
I am Meredith Sloat from Davenport Central, and it has been a busy couple of weeks in the Central community. So our dance team placed very well at the state competition. We took home first in co-ed for the 4th year in a row, second in their division in kick, third in the all-male division, and we got Division I rankings in pom and jazz. All 6 of our soloists won a Division I ranking, and a varsity freshman placed 6th overall in the Class 9 solo category. Our NHS program donated 97 handmade dog toys to King's Harvest. Our IJAG program is hosting a toy drive the 14th, which is today, through Friday the 18th. Tomorrow, Trium, our Music Honor Society, will be making cards for the residents in nursing homes for the holidays to spread positivity. A group learners returned to school today if they were on the hybrid schedule. And the CHS Holiday Angel Drive has been adapted to fit the pandemic and give students gift cards during the holiday seasons to help make sure everybody has a joyful holiday.
Thank you very much.
Are there any board reports? Director Poston?
Yeah, last Tuesday night, I participated in School Finance 201 put on by the Iowa Association of School Boards. One of the presenters was Patty Schroeder, who's been doing some of the presentations at our board workshops. And then tomorrow night, I will participate in School Finance 301, again put on by the Iowa Association of School Boards. And last week was very informative, and I expect the same from tomorrow night.
Thank you. Are there any other board reports? Director Snyder.
We had touched on it at our committee of the whole meeting the other night where we had a moment of silence for him, but I wanted to express our condolences to the Jones family, to Lloyd and Bella, who were tragically taken in a car accident. I didn't know Bella, but I did know Lloyd, and that is an unbelievable family. So our hearts go out to them, and hopefully soon their family will be able to see peace in all of this.
Thank you. Director Hayes.
I did a webinar that was hosted by Reading Plus, and the title of it was "What Does Student Engagement Look Like During the Second Lockdown?" It was different educators were on there talking about different things they're doing to provide some type of lighthearted learning tools to students to help them both emotionally and academically. Just wanted to also report that Monday the 7th, the tutoring classes begin over to the Lincoln Resource Center. Those are going really well. There's 10 students currently in there now, and they go from 10 to 2, and that was, it's going really well this last week. Also, mark your calendars for December 28th, one of our students, Trey Gordon, 13-year-old, has been accepted as a contestant on the Food Network's Kids Baking Championship. So it's a 2-day program he'll be on. So on the Food Network, that would be something to take a look and see one of the wonderful stories that's coming out of the Davenport district.
Are there any other board reports? Seeing no other board reports, we will move on to communications. Open forum. Open forum is a time for members of the community to give input at board meeting regarding school district issues or concerns. Individuals who want to speak should fill out an open forum request and give it to the board secretary prior to the open forum. The board will not act on any issue presented during open forum if it was not published as an agenda item. The Iowa Open Meetings Law prohibit actions on any issue that is not on the agenda. The president will set the amount of time allowed for individuals to speak during open forum. The board asks that no charges or complaints be made against individual employees of the district or community during open forum. Remarks that reflect negatively on the character or motives of any person will be called out of order. Do we have any open forum? No open forum, so we will move on to the consent agenda. Can I get a motion on the consent agenda?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move that the board accept the consent agenda as written.
can I have a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Mr. President,
Director Klein Jerome.
I would like to comment and thank the 26 early retirement people, and I see that there's one other on the list that is not in early retirement, so actually 27. Thank you for your service to the district and our students. Many of you I know personally, have taught with you. I figure that collectively, you've given over 600 years to our district and our students, and I want to say thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
Director Poston,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Approval of bills. Can I have a motion on the approval of bills?
Mr. President,
Director Snyder.
I move that the board accept the recommendation by administration to adopt the bills from the bill listing periods 11/19/20 through 12/9/20. Whereas resolved, all claims presented to the board having been duly certified as correct by the secretary, reviewed by the administration and board members, and are hereby audited and allowed as just claims and warrants drawn on the treasury for several amounts. Further resolved, the payment of claims and salaries be approved as presented for the periods of 11/19/20 to 12/9/20.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Hayes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Beck,
yes,
Director Poston,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Klein Jerome,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Superintendent report.
The first item up on our superintendent report is the return to learn data. I know the board had requested some data on student engagement. I want you to know that we have sent out a survey requesting for this data, and we have over, I would say, about 90% return rate on that survey discussing engagement for students. We've collected that data. We've put that data together. But right now, our administrative team needs to do a little bit deeper dive into that. In reflecting and looking some of the questions in particular that Dr. Beck had asked for disaggregated data. Right now, the data wouldn't be a very good conversation to bring forward. So we're looking at collecting more, and we're looking at doing a deeper analysis of that data with our administrative team. So I plan on giving an update in the board weekly finance report for that this Friday, so you can see the preliminary data that's come in. But right now, we need to do a little bit deeper dive with that with our administrative team. The second part of the superintendent's report, we have IASB on the line, and I think they're gonna start us off with a brief discussion. But before we do that, we have three principals that are a part of our district student achievement team with us tonight. We have John Flynn from Central, Sherry Simpson Schultz from Wood, and Aaron Vincent from McKinley. And so what we're going to do is we're going to listen to a presentation. I know you guys probably get tired of us here talking, so some people from the field to give you an exact picture of what's happening inside of our buildings. But before we do that, I think Harry's on the line, and he's going to kind of walk us through. I think the board, as I reflect on our committee of the whole meeting, that was outstanding. The dialogue, the conversation that we had, the direction that we're going, that's exactly what we need to do, and I applaud the board for that. And so Harry's going to kind of walk us through this format. And so Harry, are you on the line?
I sure am. Can you hear me? Audio
sir.
working okay?
Yep,
Perfect.
everything's
Patty's
working.
great. Patty's also here. I'll ask her to lean into this for a minute. So this is just a 1 or 2 minute refresher board. You should have a copy of this item, and thanks, Joe, for putting it up. Anyway, those 8 key questions, just a reminder, those came from work earlier this fall. And then the right-hand side of the page is intended for you to just take some notes as Superintendent Schneckloth and the principals share tonight as you listen to their update on Return to Learn, the remote learning. Just keep reflecting over on the questions on the left and asking yourself, see if those help trigger the kinds of notes and key ideas that you capture. And then the other piece will unpack, thanks Joe for going to page 2, this will be the reflection time after their debrief, the applied learning, or as Superintendent Schneckloth calls it, the on the spot reflection or board development, exactly right, where we'll unpack at least a couple of these questions. What did you learn? How were the questions helpful? And help you think about that moving forward. So Thanks, Joe. We can slide back to the first page and you remove that, Joe, whenever principals or Superintendent Steckloff would need to use the screen. And board members, this should be in your materials that you can keep this in front of you for learning. Help me out there, TJ, or we got head nods that this is the resource they've got in front of them.
Yes.
Harry, Director Hayes took it upon herself to get us some laminated copies of this with dry erase markers so we can write it down as we go, and then we'll have it for future board meetings.
Love it. Thank you. Great idea. Love to hear that. We'll unpack it in a little bit. And thank you for letting me to do the quick refresher. Patty, anything key I've forgotten, or are we good? I think we're good.
Here I am. I'm sorry. I had myself on mute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So, yeah, I think, Harry, you did a good job with that. And this will be one of those things that you can use for any topic, any administrative topic that you have, or any of the committees that come before you. This will be a really good tool for you to take notes on, and then make sure that you have a good, robust discussion about whatever the topic is. So, thanks.
I'll go ahead and start. I want to thank the board first and foremost for giving us the opportunity to come speak. We've been asked to give some impressions of the things that we noticed during remote learning. I tried to sit in a spot with no microphone, but Mr. Scott gave me one, so I got to start this today. So I'll start with some data from Central High School. When we started on this round of remote learning, we initially were looking at the campus data that was given to us because we felt that that was the most specific data that we could follow up on. So on a daily basis, students were asked to check in on their own. When they did check in, their attendance came out clean. If they did not check in, there was a mark called virtual not participating, or a VNP, that showed up on the campus screen. As we got into this about a week, we realized that at Central we might have been looking at the wrong target, and we started talking more about student engagement as opposed to just checking a box. So we really focused our efforts in that vein after about week one of the remote learning. But over the course of those days, we made over 2,400 calls or email attempts at contact with parents. We had a team of administrators, secretaries, paraprofessionals, attendance coaches, and student support liaisons that were making those contacts. We also made 130 home visits from week 2 on, attempting to engage our students, not only, again, in the Infinite Campus checkbox part, but also in getting onto their Google Classroom and making sure that they were staying up to date on the work that they were to be keeping up on. When we did this, we also asked students about what needs they had, if they needed more help with the technology, if they were getting everything else that they needed. So we really tried to be as holistic as we could be during that time. And some of the successes that we found during this remote learning time was that our teachers overwhelmingly thought that they were able to form some different relationships with students than they might have been able to do in the classroom, which struck me because I had other teachers that said it was very difficult to do this. A lot of teachers, including one that I live with, my wife teaches at Harrison, said that they had the opportunity to look into a student's life a little bit more than they might get to do in the classroom. So they felt that the depth of relationship was different. I saw our teachers really blossom in terms of the use of technology in the classroom. I saw the things that we started doing last spring evolve. I saw our teachers take new risks and really try to engage the students in very different ways. I saw a lot of flexibility with students. I saw teachers going above and beyond, staying on after course time was done, and really trying to assist our students. And I think a teacher put it best when she said that this really humanized everyone in a lot of different ways. So not only did we get to see into the students' lives, but the students got to look into the teachers' lives in a lot of ways too, because they saw at times a 2-year-old that had to climb on mom or dad's lap, and it made them, more human in that regard. And just very briefly, some of the challenges that were present as well. A lot of what we did was very technological based in terms of trying to reach out to people. So if we couldn't get a hold of them via phone or via email, that's where we ran into the biggest hurdle. Obviously, if they aren't checking in, a lot of times there were some problems there, so that was a frustration. The fact that students were checking in and maybe not being engaged was a frustration when I said earlier that we were chasing 2 different data streams. And we also had the students who weren't checking in and who were keeping themselves engaged, which was hard to manage as well. But overall, I have to say that I was extremely proud of the teachers at Central High School. I was proud of the majority of the students that logged on. And I don't think that we could have done what we have done over the past few weeks had we not had the opportunity to learn and grow in the spring of this year. So.
I thank you for the opportunity to share what's going on at Wood. We also, just like Central, started looking at our attendance data, which the expectation for students right now when they're learning at home is that they take their own attendance. I work with 11, 12, 13, and 14-year-olds, so we don't expect them to necessarily do that 100% well. So we also have the expectation that teachers are going to remind them every day to take their attendance. But I did want to share some data with you. During first quarter, the average attendance rate for the entire first quarter was at 87%. We had 87% of our kids attending school first quarter. We then broke our second quarter data. We went home right first day of second quarter, and we did it by 4 weeks. So the first week of second quarter, our attendance rate was 85%. The second week that we were home, it was 90%. The third week that we were home, our attendance rate was 90%. And this last week, it was 87%. And what that means is kids were either taking their attendance or teachers saw that student online and said, hey, did you take your attendance? And that got the kid to go in and do it. Or they saw them online, and then we just talked to the parent and we fixed it for them. So we were pretty pleased with our attendance data. But like Central, we felt that attendance isn't everything. Very honestly, even when kids are in school, sometimes they show up and they just don't do a lot. They walk through their day. But we didn't want that happening specifically in this instance, where it's pretty easy to be disconnected. So I asked my staff to take a look at their engagement. I said, class by class, we put up a spreadsheet. I want you to go into every single class and tell me which students you feel are engaged in your learning right now. And engaged means they're either attending your live sessions, or they're turning in their work for the day, or they viewed your video, or they sent you an email and they're doing their work and they're asking you a question. Engagement looks like a lot. They weren't expected to show up for that live session. At the intermediate level, first period was only live twice a week. The kids really, but there was learning every day. There were assignments every day. So are those students engaged? And we took every single class. I have like 50-some teachers. They teach 6 periods a day. Looked at their engagement and we averaged it for the building. And it was at 80%. And we felt pretty good about that point-blank data from our staff. So I would like to share with you the steps that we took at Wood. First thing we asked our teachers to do, they're all in Google Classroom, make sure that the students have the link. Invite them in. Make sure they're there. We took our paras, all of our extra support, student support liaisons, we have a JCL, anybody that is not a classroom teacher, and we assigned them to a teacher. So now we have a second adult in every single classroom. And that helped the teacher. The teacher could spend their time teaching, and if a student wasn't there, they could say, hey, can you go call so-and-so, make sure they get online, or have you talked to that person? So the teachers had a lot of support in their online classrooms while they're there. It also helped with management. If the teacher's technology go down, intermediate students get creative. So that kept a second adult in that classroom so that they couldn't be as creative. After a couple of days, if we had students that the teacher couldn't get, or we were seeing that they weren't attending, that type of thing, we had the counselors call them. We just created a list every day. When we started the first week that we were home, the counselors were making about 25 phone calls each. By the time we got to the fourth week, they were only making 6 because students were starting to engage and expected that phone call. After the counselors tried, if they left a message, didn't get a hold of them, the kid continued to be absent, then my associate principal and I made that contact, and we tried to get a hold of them. If we did not make a contact, we did a home visit. If we went out to the home, we left our card, still didn't talk to anybody, I then reached out to Bruce McGee, or I reached out to our SRO, and we actually asked for some well care checks. We're not hearing from these kids. We're a little worried about them. Where are they? We need to find them. Have they moved? What's going on? So those were some of the steps that we took. We also have a student intervention team, which continued to meet during this time, and we analyzed our data, attendance data, low participation data, low grade data, and just decided if they needed some extra support during this time. And we spent our time on SIT removing barriers. Delivering Chromebooks. Chromebooks break. They don't work. They can't log in. They lost, I'll be honest, I had a student lose half their charger. I don't know how you do that, but they lost half their charger. We also taught technology skills. How do you get online? How do you take attendance? We spent a lot of time doing that, even though they had done it, or they should have done it. We did that. We provided, I have weekly emails that go out to parents. You could probably ask the school board president. I probably drive them nuts because I'm constantly sending emails out to our families and our kids. We actually lined some kids up with one-on-one support. My student support liaisons, my paraeducators will sit online with a student sometimes as long as 4 hours and keep them engaged on their work, helping them. I asked my teachers anything I missed, because I shared this list, and they said, Sherry, we are giving them our cell phone numbers, we're doing home visits, we're trying to plan engaging lessons, we're using Kahoot, doing simulations. I did all of my science labs in my kitchen and in my backyard. I have a teacher that is putting together Google Meets for parents so that at night the parent can get support and help the students. And I'll just share one example. There was one student that I ended up reaching out to, finally got a hold of the parent. Parent said, I need help. I sent an email to all of the students' teachers and said, can you reach out? And this is an example of one of those emails. It's from a Mr. Corman. He said, Dear student, he used the name, I have missed seeing you in my online class. I already met with my 4th period students today, but I can meet with you privately. Please let me know what would be a good time for you. I do hold office hours starting at 1:30. The link is here. I have posted the recording for today's lesson from our 4th period class. You can watch and learn. If you send me an email, we'll set up a time and we will talk. Please reach out to me. So that stuff was happening all the time. So that's just what I would share.
Thank you for allowing me to come speak to you all tonight. As you're all aware, the 2020 pandemic has placed new challenges on students, families, and staff, but I could not be more proud of how we have all banded together to meet these challenges as a DCSD family each and every day. When the school day wrapped up on November 13th, our staffs quickly flipped a switch and moved to 100% online learning. We had all been preparing for this possibility. Were there going to be challenges? Yes. Ensuring that all students and families were communicated with on daily schedules, live teaching, links for recorded lessons, daily assignments, and taking daily attendance as well. Technology, Chromebooks that may have been broken or not functioning correctly, missing chargers, to name a few. Our school librarians jumped right in, and also our technology innovators, working to exchange Chromebooks, going to houses to exchange the Chromebooks, delivering devices, troubleshooting, and any complications that may have arisen. Attendance. We focused as a staff with a group of 5 people at McKinley Elementary School. We met every single morning to review our data from the day before, be able to start planning our attack for how we would be able to contact our families as well. At McKinley, we had an attendance percentage of 86.3% over our 18 days that we were 100% online. Phone calls were made for attendance as reminders for students to join live teaching previously to before their Google Meets. And we made 822 phone calls over the 18 days. We made home visits to families that were unable to connect with our families and provide supports. We continue to provide rigorous curriculum with the rate and pace in order for students to be successful. Were there going to be successes? Absolutely. The design of the curriculum at every grade level constructed by our district CTTs providing equity district-wide. This plan has been in place with our Return to Learn plan and provides every student to have access to rigorous, high-quality shared lessons both in the hybrid model and also 100% online. Teachers utilize all of the technology that has been learned from past trainings provided by our district. Collaboration and teamwork played a huge role in being able to accomplish our work. Breakout rooms utilized by teachers and Google Meets were used to hold small group learning and also progress monitoring. Our teachers going above and beyond to support students by scheduling small groups and one-on-one support at additional times through the Google Meets. Live instruction provided multiple times a day and recorded lessons available for access as well. The interaction between students and teachers helping each other learn curriculum, patience, and tech skills, and continue to build relationships with our families and support them in any way needed. Seeing whole classes together and getting a chance for them to learn together as one group. Every student engaged in learning. Every student smiled because we are a school family and everyone cares for one another. I would like to leave with a couple of examples here as well. This is a statement from a 4th grade teacher at Adams Elementary. The teacher shared, "I had my last student show up just a little late to the Google Meet, and one of the other students said, 'Oh look, now we're a whole family together.' Oh look, now our whole family is here." Another is a McKinley family that had just moved into the area. Through building relationship quickly, we found out that there was a need for furniture at their home. Our counselor quickly made a phone call on a program called Home Base run by a Davenport teacher, Kathleen Argo, who helped provide beds and other necessities for them. We were also able to set them up with internet. All 3 children participated each day in their Google Meets and completed all of their assignments as well.
First of all, I want to thank you for coming and sharing those stories. Those were very well prepared, and also the anecdotal data that you and the real-time data that you provided. With that being said, Harry, do you want to lead this next section, or do you want to start a question and answering with our board and our principals?
Yep. I'm sorry, getting myself going. You should be able to hear my
Yes,
voice.
We can hear you, Harry.
Sounds great. I'm good with, if you want to draw in conversation for a minute, TJ, that'd be good. And then during the reflection, there may be some more questions that'll creep up.
Excellent. So board members, if you have any questions for our administrators that are here, and if our administrators can speak to, I know you've had many conversations with your other colleagues, so from a global perspective and to your individual buildings, and anywhere we need a more global perspective, we can lean into our district level administrators that are here as well. So entertain any questions toward our administrators at this time.
Well, I get to do it.
Oh, I'll do
it.
it.
Director Snyder.
I've got a bunch of questions, but I'll just start with a couple. Sherry touched on one of them. As far as interventions go, when you have students in front of you, you got a bunch of different interventions kind of at your fingertips. How are you finding when they're fully online, what does the intervention kind of process look like, or how does that differ from actually having the students in front of you?
I can share at Wood. The intervention differs in that the students are probably getting a little bit of more one-on-one because the teachers are staying either after their session or they're calling them on the time that they aren't live. We also lined up on Friday to continue to have our, we have an MTSS period. So we have a designated piece of time every day when we're face-to-face, and there was time during the week, but we had a very scheduled time on Friday. And as the students, I observed classes, jumped into classes, observed the recordings of classes many times over the last 4 weeks. And what I found teachers doing was they would hold the kids later, or they would do an exit ticket, or they would do some type of assessment, and then they would say to that student, I'm going to have an office hour today, I'd like you to jump in at this time so I can work through that with you again. Or I'm going to pull this group back on Friday. And they would do reteaching during that time. They had the time to do that, interestingly enough, during the last 4 weeks because of how the live sessions were scheduled. So they would reach out that way. The teachers were really probably doing more of the watching, I would say, as opposed to when they're in our building. Kids have a tendency to speak up more and ask for their own help. So it's, teachers said that to me as well. While they're here in front of us, they just come get us, they grab us. But they're very quiet online. So my teachers were using their formative assessments more.
And I would add something a little bit contrary to what you just said. Our teachers found that a lot of the students that maybe were quiet and shy in the classroom were using the chat box a little more frequently. So there was some real-time data that was coming to them that they could then invite students to the office hours or to time after class. Whereas in a regular classroom, a student might sit silently by. When you're asked to populate that chat room or to go into a breakout room, some of those students were a little more vocal with the needs that they had. And I also feel that the format itself forced some of our students to be better advocates for themselves as well. They figured out that I need a little bit more help here, and they utilized the office hours that were available to that end.
And from the elementary side of it, I know that at McKinley, we were utilizing the office hours and having scheduled times for students to be able to come in. We were using data that was used from their common formative assessments that was previous when we were in the building, and then also what we were getting back from the assignments that we had online as well.
Thank you. My next question is, and again, you guys have touched on this too, but you said the teachers have office time to where I'm assuming then their students know that they're accessible during these time frames. Is there any interference? Like, is there a student that maybe is doing another class at that time that, or is that just literal free time that as if they were to come in the morning before class, you know, if they were doing in person?
The schedule was designed that way so that there would be no conflicts with the office hours.
That is great. Thank you.
Director Hayes.
I had a couple of questions too. I know some parents have spoke on availability. They're not available at the times that the office hours are. How are we working through that?
So we pre-recorded, or I'm sorry, we shouldn't say pre. We recorded the lessons as they were going on live, and then those links were also put in the Google Classroom. So if they weren't able to attend the live session, they were still able to access that lesson later on through the link and then be able to complete their assignments at a later time too.
I would also say many of my teachers were handing out their phone numbers or using Google Voice, and through email. Everybody seems to be reaching out 24/7, and they reach me as well, and I'll send an email to a teacher will send an email to a student, and I had several teachers that said, we're doing Google sessions at home in the evening for some of those parents that have reached out. We find parents don't need the daily all the time. They need 1 or 2 lessons, and then they got it, whereas the kids probably need a little more.
And Director Hayes, I would also add that Sherry spoke about engagement, how it looked different in different settings. One of the things that we talked about at Central as well was that a student might not be able to engage at the 9:30 hour, but if they got the work done that was assigned and watched that Google recording, that's a form of engagement as well. So it was really quite holistic in a lot of ways.
It sounds like all of you are doing awesome, but Sherry, I like your context to get up to 90%. I think that's awesome because that has been like one of my greatest fears. How many students are participating? What are their grades looking like? And are we going to lose a whole year? I've had a lot of that, but it sounds like you all are doing really well to keep up with that.
Any other questions? Director Poston?
I think, Sherry, you mentioned that there were students that you weren't able to contact and you physically went out. And how many students did you absolutely never make contact with, or were you able to get hold? And I guess that would apply to all three of you. Were there students out there that you were never able to get a hold of?
Yeah, we have that number down to 8 out of 500 and some kids.
We were able to contact everyone. It did take some different intervention to be able to get in contact through home visits multiple times or phone calls, but we were able to get that number to 0.
And we were not able to get to 8 or 0, in all honesty. There were a number of students that we could not make contact with. There was some mobility that occurred over the course of this time frame. The one nice thing that we do have going now, though, is as we have everyone back in the building, we're looking to find ways to provide tutoring, to provide some catch-up academies between now and the end of the term to help those students get back on pace.
Hold on. Director Beck, did you have anything?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, it sounds really loud to me. So first of all, I want to say I really appreciate the availability of the teachers. I know I've seen the change in utilization of technology over the course of the last few weeks versus the spring, with my 6th grader talking about being in breakout rooms and things like that. It seems like a lot of the kinks have worked out. I guess my one question would be sort of more about the teachers. Speaking from experience, I try to make myself available to my students as much as possible, but I have children at home and I run the risk of burnout if I am available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, and I would hate to see that happen to our teachers if they happen to have, a very high need set of students. So how are we supporting them if for some reason they feel like they're being inundated with phone calls and being asked to be available more than they feel comfortable with?
The teachers that reached out to me that showed the most frustration were some of the same students that we were talking about that we could not make contact with. I was not surprised, but I was, again, very proud of the conscientiousness that was shown by our teachers. I had people calling saying, I just can't get this student into the class at this time. I've done everything I can. It's been a lot more of just a reassuring tone on our end as an administrative team at Central that we do have, it's not a lot of time, but we have some time upon return. You're doing everything that you can. Make sure you're documenting that. Thank you for your efforts. That's a small token for a group of people that really worked extremely hard to provide all of this for our students. But they understood that there are some limitations. I mean, there are only so many hours in the day and so many ways to reach out. So that was really the tone that we took.
Director Beck, I would also say that a part of our daily schedule in the last 4 weeks, we had at 2:30 every day, we had a staff meeting every day, no matter what. And some days we had an agenda, some days we didn't, and we still met. And I stayed online till the last person got offline and just gave them the opportunity to share their frustrations. Is there anything I need to know? How can I help you? And many times they just said, like John said, I can't get a hold of this student and I don't know what to do. And we would just take that one off their plate and we would work on getting a hold of that student.
And we had something similar to that at McKinley as well, where if we had difficulty reaching out to a student or being able to get in contact with them to access, as well as that we had our team set up where they were to notify us and we would take it from there to be able to help and support there going forward.
Thank you.
Director Hayes.
Director Beck asked the question.
I thought she said thank you and muted or something. Director Beck, did you have more?
I do have another question, but if Director Hayes wants to go, it's fine.
Go ahead. The floor
Okay.
is yours.
Thank you. So my other question was really for Mr. Vincent. How is this working for the youngest kids who, I guess, I always have a concern with screen time. We know screen time can be excessive. Educational screen time is a little bit different, but it's hard for kids to focus on a screen and be asked to focus on task. And so how did you guys set up, and actually this might apply to middle school and high school as well, how did you guys set it up so that students were able to focus on a chunk at a time? Like in a class, normally you'd break for a think, pair, share, or some sort of active activity, and it's not always as easy to do online. So what kinds of things were you guys doing to sort of make sure that everybody had a chance to refocus every once in a while?
Yeah, that's a great question, and to answer that was a concern of mine, being a parent of 3 young kids as well. And so the schedule set up to enable us to be able to chunk it throughout the morning as well, especially with our K-1 students, and to be able to have a 30-minute, but it had split up into our curriculum throughout that 30 minutes, and be able to have a 30-minute break before you come back into it as well. And having that spread out throughout the morning allowed them to be able to get some screen break time. We also had teachers throughout the district, and I have a kindergartner myself, who the teachers were providing the actual in-hand materials too, so they could be able to do math worksheets or the readers and everything like that as well, without having to utilize the computer too.
I would just say, Director Beck, it is also as important for the staff members to take a break. So the schedule was set up specifically that way. They had a half an hour on, 15 minutes off, half an hour on, 15 minutes off, half an hour, and that type of thing. They had a lunch break. I think it was an hour and 15 minutes or an hour and a half or something, so.
Did you have anything else, Director Beck? Director Hayes?
Not right now.
Oh. Did you? Director Snyder?
Most of the other, in fact, all the other questions I had got answered except one. I know our teachers right now and our administrators are doing so many things that a year ago they would have never dreamed that they're doing. And that's not just our district. I think that's all across the country. So one, I want to commend our teachers and our administrators. You know, for example, I know a lot of teachers in the district, and I know one spent a Saturday driving poster boards to their students. And some would say, well, that's over and above. Well, if you ask the teachers, that's not over and above. It's just doing what they have to do to get it done. Mm-hmm. So my question is, one, how are the teachers kind of, as Director Beck said, how are they doing? Because I know they have a lot of planning time, a lot of prep time, you know, and prepping for online is different than prepping for their face-to-face. And then all of a sudden they have to scrap it and it's all online. So they got to re-prep, you know, for other things. So one, I'm concerned about the teachers and overworking them. But then my question to you would be, because I guarantee you've all had discussions with your teachers, what could we as a board, if there was one thing that we could do or give your teachers to help them be more effective and reach more kids, what would that be?
I think the biggest frustration that I hear is that we start getting good at something and then situation changes and then we get okay at that and then the situation changes again. So I think that while we're a lot more comfortable with a lot of things that we're doing, it takes a tweak almost every week to catch up with what's going on. For instance, right now with us returning to the hybrid, we still have some students who their parents have opted to keep them home. So now our teachers are prepping for students being there, students who aren't there, but they will be there on Thursday, and students who won't be there at all this week, and trying to figure out how to assess and how to provide everything that's needed. I would also say that the one constant that I hear that teachers need is time. I mean, it's just time to plan, time to reflect, time to collaborate, time.
I think I would agree. They need consistency on their priorities, just keeping the path, being consistent on those, and then they would need time. Your question, Director Beck asked the same question. I'll be honest, I asked my staff that question. I gave them a rubric last week. I'd be happy to share the data. I can send it to TJ. He can share it with you. I had a rubric, and it was actually 4 colors, like red for in crisis, that's where I'm at, and it described what in crisis was for them. And then over on the left-hand side was green. I'm rocking this, I got it, I know exactly what I'm doing, I'm cool. And then it was a 4-category rubric. And I just needed to know where my staff felt they were, and they could answer it anonymously. I had nobody in crisis. I broke the question into 2. I said, on hybrid, where are you? At home teaching right now, everybody's at home, where are you? And I had 7 staff members for the last 4 weeks that they weren't in crisis, but they were barely holding water. And I had 3 in that category for hybrid. And the rest of my staff, they either felt very good at where they were at or they were rocking it. And I would be happy to share the data with you just so you can see, but I'm asking those questions because I need to know who I need to reach out to and who I need to support. And we hope that they just talk to us and we put ourselves in a position where they feel comfortable coming to us saying, I need help with this, or I need help with this student, or I can't do it today. And I think that's also one thing that the pandemic has. We seem to be sharing more about some of our personal stuff, or I'm scared to come to work, or what about that kid? I think that we just have kind of, I don't know, revisited some of those things and what's really important. And but I'd be happy to share that with TJ. He could share that with you.
Again, time, but I'd also talk about self-care and the importance of self-care as well, and making sure that we're aware of when to utilize that and how we can be able to best do that from an administrative standpoint to be able to support our teachers as well throughout.
Thank you, guys.
Director Karen Klein-Jerome.
Are we giving them enough time, both when they're in hybrid and when they're 100% online? Because when we were in regular school, I'm not sure I always felt that we were giving them enough time. You're a high school teacher teaching all 4 blocks this term, you have no time. And I worry about them being overloaded. I think elementary teachers always are shorted on time. So what are we doing, or are we giving them time? Because that's a biggie.
With the way the schedule is set, their time was carved out to provide more, especially in the morning at the high school. The day was shortened a little bit, and more of that time was given to the teachers. A lot of the time that's available has been protected so that they have that to plan. I believe that when we were in the 100% online, there was, I don't even know if I want to say adequate time. I think for the majority of the teachers found that it was a struggle, but it wasn't, they can always use more time. You can always use more time, but I think they found ways to cope and to get things done in the time that they had allotted. I will say that there were many that struggled, especially those like you're mentioning that have 4 courses or that have multiple preps during a day. But they're working as part of their teams to work through that as well.
Karen, you were a teacher, so you know that
I do.
there needs to be about 50 hours in the day. And there are things I'm sure that slide off the plate. But they also are prioritizing what's really important. While we were at home and learning and everybody was at home, they had to learn how to reprioritize their time around planning the lessons, videoing the lessons, uploading the lessons, reaching out to students. I don't think there's a teacher that would say they don't need more time. Because then they would do the next thing, and that's the way teachers are. We're very careful to watch for people that are struggling to get done the things that need to be done, and how can we make that happen? I mean, when we build schedules, we try to make sure a teacher doesn't have 7 preps, that a teacher is limited to hopefully only 2 preps or 3 preps at the most. We work hard on that. We schedule in planning time. We're very careful about our meetings. I brought up the building meeting that we had every day at 2:30. I told them specifically, this is an optional meeting, or this is a voluntary meeting, or here's a schedule for the meeting. And so they knew to show up when they needed to show up, or if they needed to use that time differently. And I try to treat them like professionals. You need to use your time appropriately. You need to get your job done. There are some things that are non-negotiable. And hopefully we work together as a team to figure that out.
And I would say from the elementary side of it, where we have the additional time on the end of the day, is making sure that if we are scheduling a meeting that week during our building professional development time, purposeful and making sure that we're utilizing that time wisely and also providing or being aware if we have to have certain other meetings during those times that we're not overloading it in 1 week as well.
And one other question. I follow a couple groups on Facebook, so I know there are some parents who are saying, I'm not sending my kid this week, even though they are a hybrid student because the holidays are coming. How are we treating the absences if they're home doing the work, but they're not showing up during their hybrid time? Do we count them absent? How's that working?
We've been treating them as any other absence that might occur during the school year. So if a parent calls a student in, it's marked or an excused absence. I'm going to repeat that, an excused absence, where we're still providing work. We are still supporting the student as much as possible. I've had emails come to me and it's been, yes, please call your student in every day. The teacher will work with your child to make sure they get what they need.
So even though they're doing the work, they're counted absent.
They are at the intermediate level as well, because the expectation on hybrid is that they'll be there, but we're counting them excused, absent, not present, because they're not present at the building where it's expected they'll be, but we're not holding them unexcused, so it's not going to lead to any negative effects.
Okay.
Director Beck, did you have something?
Yeah, I had one more question. One thing I haven't heard about is how we're doing on reaching out and supporting our students on IEPs. When we're 100% online, I know nationally, it's not just us, have trouble with that type of support for online when we're 100% online. So I guess I'd just like to know how we're doing supporting our students with IEPs as well as possible. And I know it varies from student to student, but I guess I would say those with the biggest needs.
So first of all, we held IEP meetings to determine a plan to support those students that they'll be successful. I can also tell you if that plan is unsuccessful, we're calling meetings or the parent is calling meetings, and we have everything absolutely going on. The student that I spoke to where somebody sits with that student online for 4 hours is a student with an IEP. And that student would not be successful unless we had an adult at school online with him for 4 hours during the day, because he wouldn't engage. And when he does what he's supposed to do, we also run incentives out to his house. We run cookies out to his house. He earns wood bucks out at his house, all kinds of things. So there's a full range. I can also tell you that the paras and the SSLs, every single class that was co-taught in when we're face-to-face was also co-taught when they were at home.
Director Snyder.
One last question, because as you're coming up the stairs, you see boxes and boxes and boxes of Chromebooks sitting there in pieces at the bottom of the stairs. So when you're doing the remote portion of it, and say a student has broken their device, how are we handling that? Are we able to get them another device? I mean, I know they have some extras, but I think Joe said that today alone they had like 150 or 160 Chromebooks sent in. So
I can tell you that the first 2 weeks, I spent my days driving to houses, exchanging Chromebooks. I then decided there had to be a better plan. And so we do have security people, and we can use them for a variety of reasons. And we literally stationed one at Wood, and every time we were notified that somebody had a Chromebook issue, they had the option, can you get up to Wood today? Because I have somebody at the door waiting to swap one out for you. So they probably got a swapped out Chromebook within a 24-hour period, if not sooner. I then called Gary and said, I have a whole bunch. Can I bring some up? And he said, yep, come on up. And he gave me 3 more boxes of Chromebooks. So it just was a lot of legwork.
From the elementary standpoint, it was a goal of ours to, if we were notified of a broken Chromebook or a charger that was broken or anything else of an accessory, we were to get those to our families before the 9 o'clock Google Meet the following morning. That was a goal. We had, our librarian was meeting families at 7:15 in the morning sometimes to be able to exchange those out so the student had it for that day's learning.
And it was the same at the high school level. A lot of time in the 12th Street parking lot at Central High School waiting for people to pull up to grab Chromebooks. So I thought that the students and the parents were very good about reaching out with any technical issues, so chargers, Chromebooks, even so far as, hey, I need this book, can you get it for me? So it was a really open line of communication.
I would tell you that the Wood phone number rings on my laptop. So while I'm at my house, I can answer the Wood phone anytime. And they just called.
Director Potts?
Do you know, are the teachers able to maintain their pacing in their coursework? So then are they also then maintaining the academic expectations for each course? Is there a plan then to compare grades from the first semester of this year for the online 100% and the hybrid kids with first semester of 19, which was a normal semester? Because if you know, we need to make sure that not only are we delivering, but it's being consumed, and that kids are learning. And you know, normally we have standardized ways of determining that we don't have anymore, so we're left with grades. And you know, I'm concerned, I'm worried that high school kids are going to come up short and not get credits. I'm worried that elementary school kids are going to fall behind in math and reading. And it's a hard way to teach. It's a harder way to learn, especially if nobody's home. You know, I mean, I can log in and say, "Yeah, I'm here," and then go to a different thing. And I mean, we used to have to monitor the computer lab at school to make sure kids weren't jacking off on different websites instead of what they were supposed to be doing. So if you're assured that the teachers are maintaining their pacing guides, that's a miracle. I'm glad. But I hope there are plans to do that sort of academic comparisons, so we know, help us determine what course we're going to be taking in the near future.
Director Snyder?
All right, this is my last one, I promise, and it's not really a question. I had asked you guys what your teachers have said to you, what they need. Well, I also posed that same question to you guys. And you don't have to answer right now. I mean, think about it. But there has to be a moment where you thought, well, I wish we had this, or I wish the board could do this, or I wish as a district we could do this. In fact, I open that up to any teacher, any administrator, because we're here to serve you as a board. I mean, we're here to help you be effective so that your teachers are effective, so that our kids are getting the education that they need. So at any time, if there's something you need, something you want, something you feel, if you just want to scream at somebody, we are always here. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us, please. Any teachers, any administrators, anybody in the district at all.
We take the good phone calls too. Did anybody have anything else?
I do.
Oh, Director Hayes.
Just quickly, I enjoyed this update. I'm wondering if this is something that we can get like after every term to see if the grades are increasing and what's going on in the schools.
I think I think an anecdotal presentation paired with a dashboard would be wonderful for our school board in this conversation. So I think that's definitely something that we should build into our calendar as we move forward.
And also, Sherry, that webinar that I attended last week, they did that rubric with the students and the staff to see where are you? Are you okay with this? Clear on down to whether or not they were in crisis. And surprisingly, a few of the students were in crisis, but none of the staff was in crisis, that they had learned to work past that. And the person that was on the line, she said that periodically they just kind of went through and they would ask the question, then they may come back a couple days later. Are you still in the same mode, just to check the gauges, and extended the offer that if you're having any problems, sometimes when you talk it out, it can lighten the load for you and make you feel better with it.
Superintendent Schneckloff.
I want to answer Director Potts' question, and I think that's a very valid question. We really are looking for those common data points that we can compare, and these are all DSAT members. And when you saw that when you asked them, is there a plan? They all kind of shook their heads because we're discussing that right now. What does that look like to compare those? And it's very difficult to do. But you're absolutely right. Grades is one of those things that we can review, attendance. And so we're right now we're discussing how do we evaluate that as a district. But you're absolutely right. And one of the things that I urge our communities, our community, our teachers, our administrators, everyone, is that when we do return to full face-to-face learning, there's going to be a whole new set of challenges for those students that need to be extended and those students that have a lot of catching up to do because of the platforms that we're learning on. So I wanted to make sure that your statement and question was addressed, Director Potts.
Did anyone have anything else? I just got a couple quick things. I see Allison doesn't have her hand up, so I was just making sure I checked for that. Yes, ma'am, you do. You send a lot of emails. I probably get more emails from you than I do at work sometimes, but I do appreciate it. Ever since I got signed up on the parent portal, I do thank you for that. And I do want to thank all of our staff from bargaining, non-bargaining, administrative. I think everyone's really stepped up to the plate during this time and gave a lot. I know right now we mainly have talked about teachers and administrators, but you got your paras, your custodial, food service, and that's why I just said bargaining, non-bargaining. I didn't want to leave anybody out. And I pretty much don't have a lot of questions because everybody took them. And I'm glad that we will be getting that data together. And then Director Snyder had asked about what we can do to help. So I do appreciate your time coming here tonight. And I do like having all three grade levels here so we're able to get different perspectives. And I think it's been a good conversation so far. What are some areas that you feel as a board we should be asking more questions on? Do you feel like we asked you enough questions tonight, or is there other areas you think that we didn't even think of? I'm just turning it around here.
I guess I would say that I do watch every single board meeting. I usually watch it from my living room. I like that we're getting our house in order and that you are asking questions and that we are prioritizing things and putting the money behind where it needs to be and making sure that we're making good decisions and doing things right. And I would encourage you to just keep doing that. We need to get our house in order so that we can do right by the kids that we are serving. There's a lot of hard work going on out in the buildings, and I couldn't be I'm just humbled by the group of people that I work with. I'm delighted to be their leader. There's just a lot going on out there, so keep the priorities, keep us focused, continue to ask the hard questions, and let's get everything where it needs to be.
Thank you. Did anyone have anything else? And now I cue Harry, right?
You do, and after a thorough round of questions, I'll keep us moving forward. So I would ask, Joe, if you would please pull up that first page again. And board members with your laminated sheet, we're going to do an abbreviated piece. Just going to ask you, when you look down the left side, those 8 questions, would you each be ready to identify 1 or 2 that you say, this question or these 2 questions are going to be really helpful in us moving forward on this topic of remote learning or the return to learn. Tonight's discussion, which of these 8 questions, pick 1 or 2 that you think is going to be especially important moving forward. And then Dan, if you just round the table that each person would just share, give me your question numbers and I'll take note of these.
I will start with Director Beck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as of right now, and I apologize, I have to flip between windows to see this, see the questions. I would say that right now, the 2 to 3 most important questions are numbers 2, 3, and 5.
That's good. I'm just getting a quick frequency count and I'll spit these back out. Okay. President Goza, who else? Who's next?
Director Potts.
I would say 1 and 2.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Snyder.
I think 2 and 5.
Director Hayes.
I will select 5 and 7.
Director Klein Jerome.
I would have to say 2 and 4.
Director Poston.
2 and 5.
And Harry, I went with 5 and 7.
Okay, so while you've got your handy markers there, 2 and 5 had were identified the most, at least 5 times, and 7 was the next one. So, and one of the things I'm going to suggest is, as President Gosa and Vice President Hayes and Superintendent Schlechtoff and Cliff and I and others do planning for subsequent work, and as you think through this moving forward, keep these in mind. I would ask your superintendent what he sees, which couple of questions also.
I think number 2. I pick 2 and 5.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, that just cements it in further. So, and I think, TJ, it makes sense that we keep these in front of yourselves as superintendent and board moving forward. And as you think about what I heard multiple folks mention, and you did as well, TJ, the importance of being able to come back to this or at other times, then I would ask this, and I'm going to look at question 7 for a moment, and just around the room real quickly again, is just 1 each for now. What's 1 key idea you heard and talked about tonight from this progress report or update that you wish everybody, staff and community, knew? One key idea, and emphasis on wish everybody, the hundreds and thousands of people who did not listen to this board meeting tonight, what do you wish they knew? Powerful thing from tonight's update. Give you a half a minute to think about that. 1 key thing. And President Gosa, you can see the room, so when you think we're ready to just quickly around the room, each person share, Patty and I will be writing as fast as our pens can move.
Perfect. Lightning round. Director Klein Jerome.
I think the staff is doing everything possible to keep students engaged.
Director Poston.
Dedication of staff.
Director Potts.
I was going to say that the outreach that's taking place by the staff, teachers, to make this work.
Director Snyder.
I had that same thing, but I'm going to expand it even a little further. I think it's our teachers, our administrators, our parents, the students themselves. Absolutely everybody in this process is treading uncharted waters right now, and everybody is busting their butts to make this work. And is the system perfect? Absolutely not. But everybody is working to make this as best we can so that we can get past this and get back to students in the classroom full time. And again, I think everybody is working hard right now, and it's something we have to keep doing, and we have to be patient, and we have to let everything unfold.
Director Hayes.
I think our community, for the most part, is almost divided. So many people are, no way do you go in the classrooms, it's not safe, and others, oh yeah, we need full-time learning at all the times, but we have to remain safe and vigilant with that. But I think tonight it was discovered, even when we're out, what the staff do and to what lengths that they go through to make sure that every child in the community is getting what they need. And in spite of education, emotional needs are also, like the example that we had with the no furniture. If we were 100% online, we would have never known that. And to be able to reach out and help in broader areas more than education, I think that's awesome, and everyone needs to know that.
Director Beck.
I wrote down the extraordinary efforts of teachers, staff, administration, everyone to reach every student, and not only just reach them, but to actually get them engaged and keep them engaged.
I kind of went along the same lines as everyone else. The amount of effort that everyone has put into engaging, not only that, making sure that meals are provided. I know we didn't really talk about that, but I think that it's been a huge effort between the district as well as parents and community to help each other out to get through this time. And Superintendent Schneckloff.
I think one of the things that we hear a lot are their connectivity issues and things like that. I think that if our families are having those issues and they reach out to somebody in the building, you heard how dedicated our staff are to turning that around. And so if that message could go out to the 100,000 people that weren't listening to our school board meeting, it would be whatever barriers that you have to your learning in terms of managing your environment can be eliminated for you to the best of the possibilities. And the reason why I say that is because everyone else said that our teachers and staff are working so hard, because that would have been the answer that I concur with that, but also that quick turnaround is our expectation. So.
Harry, you're up.
All right, I have a comment. Patty can share a sentence or two, and we'll back out. Again, these questions fit no matter what the topic is, but certainly we applied them to this one tonight. It was a good place to put them to use. But down the road, whether it's finance reports, other topics, building a routine where these kind of questions guide your conversation. Good for you guys. My parting comment would be, and I was waiting to hear it, and as the conversation moved forward to the last part, I want to encourage you that amidst all the contributions of staff and parents and families and administrators all working together, good stuff, and yet you also pointed the critical piece is long-term, what's happening to our kids' learning? What's the impact on them? And we recognize we've got to keep the eye on that prize as well. And you're exactly right. So good for you guys. Patty, a comment or two from you, and we'll slide into the woodwork and just observe the rest of tonight.
Sure, I would say when you all went around the room on this, on question number 7, you all now are talking with one voice as you go out into the community. And that's very, very helpful. And then, and what you're saying is, if everybody's giving it a yeoman's effort, but there's always going to be a but, which means we still got to focus on what the long-term impact is going to be. So there's your message. There's your message going out, and everybody's saying the same thing.
Patty and Harry, thank you very much for your help with this tonight. We will now move on to items requiring action. Can I get a motion on the approval of Dr. Kabilski's retirement and release?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board approve the acceptance of Dr. Kabilski's retirement effective December 2nd, 2020, approve the retirement agreement and release, and amend the early retirement incentive plan as to Dr. Kabilski as provided in the retirement agreement and release.
is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Poston,
Yes, with regret.
Director Beck,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Can I get a motion on the approval of the revised early retirement incentive?
Mr. President,
Director Hayes,
I move the board approve the revised early retirement incentive as presented.
can I get a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Klein-Jerome. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I will call for the vote. Director Hayes,
Yes.
Director Klein-Jerome,
Yes.
Director Poston,
Yes.
Director Snyder,
Yes.
Director Potts,
Yes.
Director Beck,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Motion carries. Discussion items. Monthly financial report.
With us tonight, well, before we start our monthly financial report, I have to give a shout out to our finance committee. I think we're beginning to establish a routine that allows us to review our monthly financials collaboratively with our school board members. It allows us to have perspective on both sides of what board members are seeing and the reports that we're leading into it. So I want to thank you guys for your dedication and your time to that. Bill Decker has really been essential to helping us out with that as well. And so the monthly financial report that you see here has been reviewed by our finance committee. And the goal moving forward is that we would review the previous month in that fashion. The finance committee would review, be able to answer any questions, highlight things from the board. And in our IASB training, it's very interesting. And I think one of the things that's key for us to remember as our committees move forward is that the finance committee serves the board. And I think so far that finance committee has done just that. With that being said, Gary Sinclair is online with us, and Lisa, I think you're ready to help out as well. So Gary, let's do a microphone test. Can we hear you?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Director Beck, are you able to see
Good.
the screen
Okay.
that Gary is sharing?
No. But that's okay. You guys can carry on. I may try and re-log in. That seemed to work last time.
Okay.
Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you. Each month, this is what the board should be receiving, this report. 2 reports. I will be doing them with Lisa for the next probably 2 to 4 months. But this is what the board should come to expect and insist on. You will be given in these 2 reports the key measures about where your district is and where they're going. This will take a little more time today because you've got to become oriented with the actual report. So you can start with, you can see at the top, it will tell you through what month. Lisa and her staff have done a great job of getting November entered, and this is through November. Now this is, the report is the key measure report. So if you're looking at it, it's say key measures December of 20. So this will tell you what month. There are two terms that you have to really get a handle on. And the first one is fiscal year 21 budget. What that means is the budget that we submitted to Forecast 5. That's what the budget number is. Now, right now, for spending, we submitted 195 million. We expect that to go down closer to 191 when we get all of the reductions identified. But understand that whenever we've got a column that says fiscal year 21 budget, that means the budget that we submitted to Forecast 5. That's pretty clear cut. The one that is probably the most difficult is the fiscal year 21 projected. What does that mean? Projected means that we take the actual year to date. So we take what actually happened July through November. Not estimates, not projections, but actuals directly from your district's budget. Then we project December through June based on your 5-year history. So when we look at property tax, projected includes any property tax you have received July through November, plus whatever percent is what you have received as an average over the last 5 years. So what that does, that's a budget essentially in progress. Every month, we will get a clearer and clearer picture of where we are, because every month, more of our budget becomes actual. So understand that the column of budget is what we submitted to Forecast 5. The projected is year-to-date actual plus what we have projected the balance of the year. Any questions about that before I go on? That's a very critical understanding for the board. Okay. The first measure, now remember, this is all general fund. The first measure is unspent balance. So what we're going to do is we give the board the history of unspent balance over the last 5 years. This is actual unspent balance for the last 5 years, knowing that we ended last year at a positive 2,004,000. What is important are these numbers. Where do we think we will end the year? You don't want to wait until next October to get an idea of where you're going to end the year. Right now, we think we're going to be about 7.5 to 7.7. Actually, I think we'll be a little better because we don't have included any additional cuts in either of these numbers. But right now, we are projecting to end the year positive. Now, remember when we talked last month, the SBRC doesn't let us count things like special ed deficit or English language learners in their model because they're estimates. In our model right now, we're including all of that. So I would really expect this to be a little higher. Right now, I don't know that I have a concern. I do believe that our maximum budget is trending a little low. My guess is it has to do with miscellaneous revenue. And really what I did is when I reviewed this, I went back to the actual tool and I started looking at where are we over, where are we under. And most of our under is federal dollars. Federal dollars are things you apply for to get. Right now, you can see some pretty big red numbers in federal dollars that we expect to catch up with as we progress through the year. So right now, I'm a little concerned, not concerned. That's something that we'll want to watch each month to make sure that we're getting those federal dollars. The other thing is we think spending is going to be closer to 191 to 192. And our projection model is showing that right now. This is an extremely critical measure for any district, but especially for Davenport. Where are we going to end the year? If we would have told you in December of 2018 that you were going to end the year a negative 12 million, that would have set off a lot of alarms and you would have done something then. Unspent balance. Where do we think we're going to end the year and where have we ended the year the last 5 years? History gives the board a sense of context. Questions about unspent authorized budget. The next one looks at a year-to-date measure. This is looking at where are we on spending year-to-date compared to where we have been the last several years. Let me lock this in. So we have spent $65,919,000 year-to-date. If you look at that, that is less than we spent the last 4 years through November. According to the budget we've submitted, that's 34% of our budget. According to our projected, that's 34% of our projected. But as you can see, it is running a little lower than where we have through November the last 5 years. Now, I really think that when we change our budget, this is going to be a little higher. We're going to be probably at 30, we would have been at 35%. But this is good enough and close enough that we're comfortable that we're trending properly. Questions about expenditures year to date?
Gary, are
Yep.
The percentages, so what you're saying is we're pretty much where we should be, or we're a little bit less than what we should be?
I think we're a little less than we have budgeted, and we're a little less than our projected.
Okay.
So right now, it's trending such that we're not going to expend as much as we think. And, you know, really, if I tell you you spent 34% of your budget through November, unless there's some context, unless you know what you've done the last several years, it doesn't mean much. Now, that's only 3%, but it's 3% of almost $200 million. So it's a large amount of money. The next section deals with annual authority. If you remembered in last month's discussion, we talked about budgeting for the next year starting soon. We hope to talk about negotiations at our next finance committee meeting and then come to the board with that. But annual authority is where we start in budgeting for next year. Before we decide how much we're going to spend next year, we need to decide how much authority we're going to have. What this does, this looks at your annual authority for this year. And you can see the last 4 years you have spent, except for last year, you have spent more authority annually than you generated. Now, last year, we underspent our authority annually for the first time. That's why we ended up with a positive unspent balance. We need to be targeting 100% of our annual authority. Once we get our unspent balance built up, we should be spending the authority that we're generating every year. But we've got to get that balance high enough that we can do that. Right now, our budget is projecting 97% of our authority. Our projected is spending 97% of our authority. We want these numbers to be pretty close. Now, there's still some variances up above that we have to continue to monitor. If this much variance is occurring in February and March, we want to do a deeper dive and give the board more explanation. Any questions on annual authority?
Gary, I have a quick question. This is Linda.
Yeah.
Did you say we should target 100% of our spending?
Well, I did say that, but let me clarify. Is every year the unspent balance list, the unspent balance that we look at from the state. If you remember this, we spent a lot of time on this last month, and this identifies all of the ways that we develop authority. When we start budgeting for next year, we need to look at that authority on an annual basis. What did we generate? What did our kids generate for this year? Now, we can't really do that right now because we're trying to recover from overspending. But once we recover and once we have a normal budget, we should look at spending 100% of our annual authority, not 100% of our total authority, but 100% of our annual authority. ISB recommends that we target 100% of that annual authority. Now, you're never going to be exact. Some years a little more, some years a little less. What has happened is at Davenport is we've been over too much every year. I mean, when you overspend a $200 million budget by an average of 3 or 4% for 3 years in a row, that's what created the problem. But to answer your question again as clear as I can, once we get our budget to the level that is acceptable for unspent balance, we ought to start each year in looking at what is our annual authority that we have to spend for the next year. The next one looks at solvency. Remember, solvency is simply at the end of the year, how much cash do we have that's not obligated? Not how much cash do we have, because we may have a lot of cash, but a lot of that is obligated. All of your categoricals have some carryover. Those dollars are obligated. You owe some bills. Those dollars are obligated. Solvency is assigned and unassigned. What dollars do we have that are not obligated? And you can see that there's a ratio, and that ratio is simply a formula that was designed. You don't need to know the formula. You need to know that this solvency needs to be 5 to 15%, not to exceed 25. But as I've told you in the past, my concern is not so much about the level of, but the leveling of, that we get to a level that we can maintain. Now, you can see that it dropped pretty significantly from 16 to 18, and then it's been building up. But it's starting to level off, and it will do more of that. And in fact, it will drop as we start to look at our planning model. But essentially what we want to do is, you can see where we think we're going to end the year. This column is based on the budget we submitted. This is based on the year-to-date action that we know, plus what we project for the balance of the year. Now, had we projected either of these to be at 2 or 3 or 15 or 16, we'd want to say, wait a minute, what's happening that's causing that big variance? We want to focus on the leveling of all of our key measures. This is a healthy position for the district, but cash has been healthy for the district. Questions about solvency?
Gary, this is Karen, and I actually have a question. How long do you think it's going to be before we get our UAB at an acceptable level that we can move to our spending authority of 100%? Like next year, do you think we'll be at that point, or 2 or 3 years? I mean, just roughly.
I think that probably not for 2 to 3 years. I think next year we're going to have to be we've got to build it up a little higher. I mean, we're not going to end probably at a level the board wants to be at. So I think we've got another year of trying to get that under control. My concern, I think, had things been normal, I think by year 2 and certainly 3, we would be fine. But with the environment we're in right now, we dropped 459 kids. We've got a budget guarantee of 4.2. We don't know supplemental state aid, so I'm a little leery to say that we're going to be at probably that annual authority analysis in 1 or 2 years. I think it's going to take 2 or 3. But I'll tell you this, next year, I'll be working with you when we project next year's budget, and we will start with that annual authority. And we'll start discussing that and saying, now our unspent balance isn't high enough. So of that annual authority, how much are we not going to use to build up our regular unspent balance?
Okay.
That answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yes.
Gary, this is Kent.
Yeah.
On the solvency ratio, the workshop that I participated in last week, they talked about, and you've talked about it too, not going over 25%. However, they did say that out of the 325 school districts in the state, 107 of them are over 25%. Would you review again? You talked about how that hurts the current students when you go over the 25%.
Okay, it's actually a separate issue, but that's a great question for us to talk about. What I've talked about before is your spending authority. If your spending authority continues to grow, that means you're not spending that annual authority. It is my belief that the kids that you have each year generate that annual authority, and that's what you should be spending on them. If you don't spend that annual authority on them, particularly if it's too large, I think that becomes a problem. If your unspent balance grows to be a very large number, I think you've got to ask, why are you generating that authority? It's to educate kids. So when I talked about my concern for it getting over 25%, that's about authority, not cash. The cash issue of getting too high relates to tax rate and the use of your dollars. Because if you're putting on a lot of cash, you're putting on more taxes. So we have to be careful that we don't put on too much cash and have that solvency build up. But when you're talking, and I want to be clear here, I'm not saying that over 25% is bad. Every district has to analyze why that spending authority ratio may be growing. And my concern, if it grows consistently and or too high, is you're not using that annual authority for kids. Now, there will be some reasons that districts won't. Sometimes they can't do it because of tax rate, because they can't spend more. There's a lot of reasons for that. This solvency is looking at cash, not spending authority. That was a lot of answer. You okay with that?
Yes, because that clears it up. I was thinking that was more towards the solvency side, but and they did mention in the workshop too, as far as how it does impact taxes.
And we will have this exact same discussion every month for a long time, because clarifying the difference between spending authority of cash is one of the most difficult things we have to do. We want to then look at revenues year to date. We have taken in $68,725,000. That is $725,180. That is 35% of our budget. Now that's trending lower than what we've seen in the past, which would be indicative of what we talked about in spending authority. Up here, I think that what we're low on right now is miscellaneous revenue, which includes federal I looked, and it's federal dollars and interest. So it's not surprising, but we don't want this to go on too long. We want to monitor it's not bad, but we want to monitor this each month. This is year to date. Now, if I tell you that we've taken in 35% of our budget, unless you have a context of the last year's same month, it's not going to mean much to you. Question about solvency and revenues. Okay. Last April, your board approved what's called the certified budget, and you certified that with the state. You had a budget hearing, you had a chance for people to give input, you published it before, so it's a pretty big deal. And essentially what that is you telling the public the maximum you're going to spend this year. Unless you amend, that's legally the maximum you can spend. Now that is broken into 4 areas: instruction, support services, non-instruction, other, and total. Now this is not just general fund, this is all funds. Activity fund, hot lunch, PEPL, general fund, everything. So you tell the public the maximum you can spend in each of those. So for instruction, you told the public you're going to spend a maximum of $126 million. Now, when you look over the last 5 years, you can see what you actually spent. Year to date, we have spent 32% of our certified instruction budget. When you look at where we have been through November of the last 5 years, we were considerably higher. We're in pretty good shape. What this will tell us as we progress through the year, if we need to amend the budget. If we see that we're going to overspend in an area, we need to amend the budget. For support services, we certified that we're going to spend $59 million, and you can see over the last 5 years, in most cases, we spent less. we are spending less in some areas. That's 43% of our certified budget. A little higher than we like to be compared to the last 5 years. The next number will obviously jump out at you. This is non-instruction programs. This is hot lunch. And if you have a before and after care program. We certified at 427,000. And you can see over the last 5 years, we were in excess of 7 million. Lisa did some reviewing and found that there was an error in the certified budget. That in fact, we left out some of the areas that we needed to certify. So what Lisa will be doing is bringing to you in January an amendment. Now, need to be careful because we're going to increase what we can legally spend. It does not impact taxes at all. It simply allows us to tell the public the maximum we're going to spend. So this is really a result of just a clerical error that occurred on the certified budget last April. We're going to fix it as soon as we can. There's no reason to wait until May or June. We're going to fix it in January. We'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to tell you why we're going to do it. We'll publish a notice of that change, and then the board will be asked to approve it. So these 5 areas, and really right now, when you look at the total, we're at 37.7, which is a pretty consistent where we've been over the past several years. So every month, the board's going to look at where are we compared to our certified budget. Because this is one of those legal requirements. Unspent authorized budget is a legal requirement, and not overspending your certified budget is a legal requirement. For certified budget, we can amend our budget up until June 30th, and we're going to do that. Any questions about the certified budget piece?
Gary, under other, we've spent 55%. Why is that column so high compared to past years?
Well, you can see, and we're going to have to review this, you can see that what we certified the budget at, this is typically construction and facilities. So this is something we're going to have to monitor and see what that, we certified much lower. You can see that. So did we complete a lot of projects in July, August, and September? Is that why? Are we about done spending for these? Or is this certified too low? When I first saw this, I thought that's too low because we spend alone, we spend more on PEPL. And PEPL is mainly spent from here. I suspect we'll find out this may have certified too low.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but here's why this report is important. This is December. We're talking about this in December and not in June or worse yet, July, August, and September that we overspent. If this is a great question. Karen, was that who asked that? That's a great question.
Yes, it was.
If that shows there again next month, as a board member, you say, wait a minute, that's 2 months in a row. What's going on? Why aren't we taking care of that 493? That's exact. This page is giving to you the information that you need to know and or need to be asking about. Our unspent balance, our annual unspent balance, our solvency, and our certified budget. Okay? Any questions before I go to the next report?
Gary?
I'm sorry this is taking a little longer than I had thought, but it's really key information that we want to know.
Gary, this is Linda. Is that also the same explanation for support services?
I don't think so. I don't think it is. I think when I look at that, it brings up a question that, but I think we're just spending less. So we're going to monitor that and see if that continues to run a little higher. All of these are things, when you look at it, we're spending about the same we have for the last 5 years. I mean, the average is 25,193. So it could be that we undercertified. We don't know yet. It's something that when we do next month, we'll be able to tell more. We can go to 5Cast, and this is what Lisa and I will do. We can go to this tool, and we can go to spending, and we can look at this spending in general fund and say, I just want to look at the 4 categories. These are the 4 categories. Okay? So we can check them all, but then we can go to the 4 categories and say, okay, I want to break it down and I want to look at it by object. And so it'll show us all the objects, and then we can analyze this to decide if there's any area. We were talking about support services. Right now, personnel's running a little high, support services and supplies. They're running a little high. Now, we'll have to see how those trend out as we move along, but we certainly have got to be looking at those. But this is how we analyze it. And we go down and look at other, and we can see where we're high or where we're low. The Forecast 5 tool allows us, once we identify an area, to monitor it and delve deeper into it. But I don't think that's what this is. I think these 2 down here could be a certified budget issue. I just think we expect to spend less, and it may trend out that way. I mean, if we continue to trend higher, here's the thing. Each year spends a little different. You spend some of it earlier, and then you don't spend as much. December, we really start to distinguish between month to month. November, actually, it starts to really start to raise questions. And December, we can tell more. The important thing is to have the data, to analyze the data, to ask the question and get answers. The second report is one that I think the board will relate to more, because this looks at a cash versus revenue, a cash versus spending. So what it does is it takes revenue, it breaks it into local, state, federal, and other. It tells you for fiscal year 21, how much have we taken in from local dollars? And what percent of our budget is that? How much have we taken in state dollars and percent of budget? Federal dollars, percent of budget, and then other, which we don't have any, but then total. So again, just as we saw before, there's that 68,725,000 that we saw in the other report. Now, that is trending at about 35%. And as we showed on the other report, it's trending a little lower than we had anticipated. So, if this were at 26, 27, 28, I would be alarmed. I'd start to say, we have misestimated our budget. This is all based on our budget. Now, this isn't going to change. Our budget's not going to change much because we pretty much got revenue where we think it's going to be. But giving you context, if I told you that we've spent 35% or we've taken in 35% of general fund, unless you have some context of where you've been at the same month the last 4 years, that doesn't mean much to you. In fact, if this is November, I'm 5/12 of the way through the year, I'd almost be alarmed if I didn't have some context. Then we go to the expenditure side, and we break that into salaries, benefits, purchase services, supplies, property, other, and total. So you can see that we spent 35% of our salaries year to date. Dollar-wise, we're spending less, and percent-wise, we're spending less. Now, we're going to adjust this budget, so I really think that that's probably going to be at 36%. And the same with benefit. We're trending very low now, and I think that we're going to be a little higher in coming months. But there's nothing in these numbers that are terribly alarming. Supplies, we're running really quite a little bit ahead in supplies, but a lot of that is COVID related. We're buying a lot of supplies for COVID related. But I think that the board understanding what is our revenue year to date, how does that compare to the same point in time the last 4 years, what's our expenditure by major category, and how does that compare to the last 4 years? Now, this is an interesting here. The last 4 years, for the month of November, we spent more than we took in. This year, for the first time in 5 years, we actually took in more than we spent. We started the year at 25 million. We expect to end at 28. Just as we saw in the cash analysis insolvency, we think we're going to end with more cash. Now, this isn't solvency because this is cash balance. And you got to remember that we may end the year with 28 million, but a large portion of that is obligated. This, I think, boards relate to pretty quick. Is what have we received in revenues year to date compared to the last 4 years? What are we spending year to date compared to the last 4 years? What's our surplus or deficit for the month? Where did we start the year? Where do we think we're going to end the year? We do the same analysis for all of the other funds, but we don't give you a 5-year comparison. If we did, the report would be so overwhelming that it wouldn't be of any value to the board. Focusing on general fund, year to date, where are we at? And again, what's alarming? I mean, we're talking about close to $200 million. If this is 5%, 6% off, we need to start asking questions and to see why. Questions about this monthly fund reporting. Okay, this will not take as long each month because once you start to understand it, it becomes easier. The other thing I would share with you each month is an analytic about the district. What this is this first analytic looks at student enrollment over the last 10 years and regular education teachers. So you can see the trend line for your enrollment has been going down. This is certified enrollment. And in fact, in that time, your certified enrollment is dropped 8.4%. Your staffing for regular education teachers actually increased pretty dramatically through 16. that's when you started to have financial troubles. Regular ed teachers have declined steadily over the last 5 years, 4 years. If we look at us having 84.3% of our total expenditures, salaries and benefits, the piece of it that's regular ed teachers has come down. So we need to look elsewhere as a potential issue. And we'll do more of that next month. But this is a view of what's happened to enrollment and what has happened to regular education teachers. Not all teachers, regular education teachers. Any questions about this visual? Visual 2. I did this, submitted it to Mary, and then showed it to TJ and Bill. So 2 and 3 have to be considered together. And you don't have a copy of 3 yet. I will send it and it will be made available to you. But I did this, and what this does, it shows your enrollment projection, and you can see it's the same enrollment. That's your entire student body. It is down 8.44. Your special ed teachers have grown drastically. In 2019, up 57%. Now they came down in 20 to 37.95. When you first look at that, you think, my gosh, there's the problem. We're just adding too much special ed staff. But when you look at this, remember that it's to your entire student body. It's not to special ed teachers. Bill and TJ, and then when I talked to Sandy, had the same concern that we needed to look at this differently. And so we did that. What this does is this looks at your staffing change for special ed, which is still up that percent we talked about. It's still up 37.95, but the blue line looks at your weighted enrollment. So in fact, the reason that your special ed staff has increased so dramatically is the number of kids that are weighted in special ed has grown dramatically. You can see that in fact in 2019, that was actually up 55.39%. And for this actual year, which is waiting off of last November, is actually up an average in those 10 or 11 years, about the 38%. This is a better picture of what's happened in special ed than this one. This is not an invalid consideration. We do need to ask is why is our special ed numbers growing so much compared to our regular education? But more importantly, in looking at finances, is to look at what is happening to the weighting of special ed kids. I do think when we get the count of special ed, when we do our beds, I think you'll find out that it's going to grow, that we're going to cross here, that due to the issues that Sandy and her team are identified, we presented that last month, the increased violence, the increased compliance issue, the equity issues, that in fact this year, fiscal year 21, we've had a decline in weighting, but probably an increase in staffing. And that's why we're going to see such a large special ed deficit for fiscal year 21. But I will make sure you get this, because really the two that I showed you, the regular ed teachers tells the story. The special ed staff compared to the entire student body tells a story. But this is really the rest of the story that gives you a better picture of why special ed staffing has grown so much. Now, we may want to say, we don't think that we probably wanted special ed weighting to grow that drastically, but that's why it happened. Those charts 2 and 3 really need to be considered together. What questions do you have about these? Okay. By the way, the first two come out of forecast 5. And that's probably why I just pulled this, but Bill Decker and TJ's questioning and request to look at the data in a different format is why we came to the third one, which is great that they did that. Okay, hopefully next month this will take less time, but it's something that until the district gets on a sound financial basis, we need to analyze this thoroughly every month. I am done.
Thank you, Gary. We appreciate the detailed financial report. Before we move on to the next item, I'm going to call for a quick 5-minute recess because we've been going a little bit longer than 2 hours here, and then we'll get right back to it. All right, everybody's back. We'll move on to the next discussion item, water quality project agreement with the City of Davenport.
We have a group of people here to talk about this this agreement. First of all, I'd like to thank Amy from the City of Davenport for just kind of sticking around with us. These meetings get a little long, and so thank you for being here with us to help us navigate this tricky subject that we have with us today. And so, Josh, if you wouldn't mind kind of leading us through, Josh and Amy, kind of leading us through exactly what this project entails and an overview for the school board. And also, we have Eric Page with us here too, as this is one of his projects that he's managing. So, thank you guys for being here. Josh.
Thank you. This project started, I think, back in 2018. They started discussing doing this watershed project and land improvement. Eric and Amy were both present in some of the meetings or all of the meetings. So I brought them with to discuss this project a little further than what I would be able to, as I've only talked about it once or twice before this. Amy, if you want to give a kind of a recap of what happened.
Well, thanks for having me. A little bit of background, I'll try to be brief. We've got some sanitary sewer projects going on down at the wastewater treatment plant. And as part of that, we get some loans from the government. And in relation to that, there's an SRF program, State Revolving Fund, that essentially gives us back any of the interest dollars we would have paid on that sanitary sewer loan for us to put in a clean water project to improve water quality. So for our 1930 sewer separation and then our UV disinfection projects that we have at the plant, both of those gave us about $800,000 in clean water funds to implement sponsored projects or these clean water projects in town. And so one of them early on, we were thinking about doing a wetland over by the baseball parks on Kimberly and Wisconsin. It turned out the design for that wasn't going to work, and so we have our current configuration, which is a stream bank stabilization project and then a prairie restoration on about 19 acres of the 55 that the current tenant farms out there. And one of the goals in that was to have a partner and continued partnership between the city and the schools. We've had water education with different grade levels over the past several years in conjunction with some of our state permitting. And so to continue that and bolster it and provide some potentially value-added education opportunities for kids in chemistry and biology and some other field exercises like that. We thought if we had this area, we can potentially do field trips once again, get kids out there in the field. The project improvements would be planned and constructed by a contractor through the city. All the bidding would go through the city. The maintenance and repair agreement verbiage indicates that the school would have no responsibility for any maintenance dollars or time or hours. It would be solely on us. We have in-house staff that are trained in, pre-construction once the initial stuff is done, so we'd be able to take care of that. And then there are several other projects in conjunction with those funds. This would just be a portion of it. And it did start in 2018 when we first started discussing it with the previous facilities supervisor or manager, I'm not sure. And so with a lot of the turnover, I think some of the information had been lost over the last couple of years. So we're just looking for some confirmation, if not tonight, next meeting, hopefully, that the school board is in agreement with this project or has interest in it and wants to see it move forward. And if not, at this point, we would kind of pull the plug on that design and move on to some potential other projects. But we're really excited about this one and the potential opportunities it holds for us and students in that kind of interaction. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to see it's really the easement plat was just kind of the general site layout of it.
How's this property currently zoned? Is it?
That's a good question. It's probably zoned ag still because it's in a largely agricultural area. But I'm not sure how the baseball diamond property is zoned either at this point. But it wouldn't, I don't know that the land use necessarily would be a hindrance to get the project installed.
This is in city limits, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So then, will that require a special use permit or not?
I would have to check with zoning. I'm not sure on that. The only thing that they had mentioned was a potential floodplain, no adverse impact type of certification. They haven't said anything about a special use.
And then, how about the surrounding landowners? Have they been contacted?
I should have brought our design engineer here with me. I think that they've contacted the homeowner to the north, and then we've made contact with the tenant farmer who's on the property currently. But I don't think that because there's no subdivision or rezoning that the mandatory requirement to let people know within 200 feet of proposed boundary was triggered.
That's probably true, but I would still suggest that would be a good idea.
Sure.
To contact those property owners. I don't see where something like this would have an adverse effect on that, but I think it would be just good practice to contact them.
Did I miss anything? Or is that?
Do any other board members have anything? Director Beck, did you have anything?
No, I guess my only question would be, when would all this be done?
Sure.
I might have missed that.
Oh, no, I don't think that came up. The projected schedule, I think, would be to start construction this summer. We were waiting on hearing back from the tenant farmer to see if there are any contractual obligations that we would have to break or not. And it turns out that's not the case, though he has invested some dollars in fertilizer and lime in the fall. I'm meeting with our director tomorrow to see if we can help compensate him financially for that part of it.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say if we can offer some sort of compensation for that, that would be probably a good thing to do. But I would like to echo Director Poston's comments that just out of neighborly kindness, contact the property owners in the area. But otherwise, it seems like a great idea.
Anyone else?
Just
Director Poston?
Yeah, and again, concerning the property owners, I mean, if you look at the overall picture right here, that is coming right up close to the neighbor to the north, right up, it looks like right up close to his house. So again, I think it would be a good practice to contact them.
We'll evaluate the neighbor situation tomorrow and get right on talking to them.
And then if I'm understanding this correctly, this is district property, but the city is going to be paying for everything and maintaining everything, so we're just pretty much letting you use our property to do this, is that correct?
That's correct. So it would be either in, put into a perpetual conservation easement, to keep the use and thereby the federal dollars invested in it. There's, I'm sure there's a period of time where they, and I can get the information too, where they require the practice to stay because they're making that investment. And then, there could be any number of solutions long-term if it wasn't, if you wanted to entertain the idea of a sale or something other than just keeping the conservation easement, we would entertain those discussions too. We just had never gotten that far with the board or the district up to now.
Okay. The first time I heard about this was a couple weeks ago through some emails. And then our students would benefit from this to be able to go and observe this and field trips and stuff like that.
Yep,
I'm
that
assuming.
was one of the goals, yeah, whether we, I think in the past we've had to apply for some grants to get busing available, but we do have some operational funds we could put towards that, and then we can, depending on curriculum base, there might be certain ages we want to target. I know we weren't in the schools as much this year as we had been in the past. Robin Dunn, our communications coordinator, had programs for sixth graders and then some for earlier elementary over the past few years that we haven't really been able to do in the pandemic. So we're hoping once things kind of settle down and normalize again, we can continue that and use this as one of those places where we can do, water quality monitoring or things like that we've normally done down at down on the river. But when flooding kind of affects that, we could use this location, things like that.
Would there be any of the land that the farmer currently uses still available to him, or that location is just out altogether?
No, I think there's around 50 or 55 acres total, and this project would consume 19 of those, so we'd still have a lot of usable area.
Okay, thank you.
And he has said he would continue to rent from us in that area, so.
So he'd still be on our land, just not this 18 acres?
Correct.
Okay.
I'm assuming that would, whatever the agreement is, it would be obviously for less money because he's got less acreage, I'm assuming, right?
Correct.
Okay. Anybody else? Director Hayes.
In this agreement, it mentioned that the owner could be responsible if some of the issues weren't repaired in a timely manner. What types of things or violations would that entail? What could possibly be
I
responsible
think that
for?
may be holdover language from our template that was sent over in the draft maintenance repair agreement for review. That has been modified to say that the city, because if we're taking responsibility of all the O&M for the whole area, it wouldn't be the owner. If you were to remain the property owner, that should be changed to the city shall repair. And that could be anything with, if the seeding didn't take and there's some weeds instead of natives, if there's an issue with a stream bank stabilization area or if there was some erosion, like we would have to come in and repair those types of things. I don't believe there are any actual structures. We're not putting in manholes or infrastructure in that regard. There will be like a low flow rock crossing through the stream, and that would be the only quasi structural component to do repairs on. So that would have to be changed, and it wouldn't be owner responsibility.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
I'll double check on that tomorrow too.
Director Poston.
In the explanation here, then it later on it talks about the National Guard motor pool and turning that into parking lot, and I'm not quite understanding how this is tied together with that.
Sure. We had some earlier conversations, I think, with Mike, indicating he He would also be interested in having some type of bioretention cell or water quality treatment area coming off of one of the existing parking lots, kind of in exchange for being able to redo the National Guard parking lot area. Our current ordinances require stormwater quality treatment and detention for any new impervious surface project over 5,000 square feet, which this project certainly would be. However, it's in the floodplain, and we don't allow detention in the floodplain because that's already detention for flooding. And so as part of kind of a swap for some of that, instead of having to pay a full waiver, because there's a fee waiver if you can't put in detention, was to install a practice somewhere else on the Brady Street area to help kind of compensate for that as an exchange. So that's where that ties in. We haven't gotten final approval from the SRF and DNR teams to install that one, but we just wanted to mention it because it was part of our original proposal and maybe coming down the line.
So the two are tied together, or are they two separate projects?
There would be two separate projects potentially from the same group of $800,000 funding, but potentially from the other one. So it gets a little messy, but we submitted one big application with lots of different projects to apply to both different sections of funding. So the folks with the money in the end essentially get to pick the ones that they like out of that application. So one that we submitted had to do with Brady Street Stadium. We just don't have final confirmation that that's when they're going to fund. Was that at the end of that memo? Okay.
Well, as a fairly new school board member, I guess I'd like to get more up to speed on what's going on with the National Guard area and what our intentions are. Does everyone on the board know what the intentions are for that? Maybe I missed it along the way.
There was intentions there to move operations and the bus operations down to that area as well. Some of that's been put on hold a little bit at the time. We're discussing long-range facilities plans, the 10-year plan, as we speak, kind of. So the plan that was there previous when she was talking to Mike has potentially changed. It could potentially be the same. We just haven't made that decision yet.
Anybody got anything else? Nada? And you're looking at bringing this to us at the probably first regular meeting in January, because you probably need us to vote on this, correct?
That's, I believe, the plan. I think you guys need an answer, so you can either move on or do the project.
Yeah, we need to get a formal approval, even if it's a verbal from the board, and then we can work on getting agreements signed so we're very clear on who's doing maintenance, what schedules are, and things like that. We want to make sure that communication is open. And if there's some other type of agreement that the board has as a typical with any property type of agreements, that's fine too. We would just sort of need to see that and then have our legal team also look at it so we can have all the verbiage that needs to be in there.
Okay. And the city's already spent quite a bit of money on this, I'm assuming.
Right. We, starting back in 2018, we got, I don't know what to call it, very strong support and assurance that the project would be able to move forward. And so we are using some of those SRF dollars. Well, it will be reimbursed, I think, up to about 76,000 already on the survey design and things like that. So we do have some dollars invested. And so, of course, we'd like to see it move forward.
Thank you. I guess to get a sense from the board, what other information would you like to feel comfortable with voting on this the next meeting? And then I'll just go around the room and Karen, you look like you wanted to say something.
Well, I guess then I want to know by the next time I vote how the Brady Street, that area over there, how that ties into this. It seems like, well, one time we talked about it, but are these two separate things, or is it one giant thing we're voting on, both properties? I know, I realize you just said it's in a long-range plan, but is it short enough that we could make that plan or assumption on it in the middle of January?
We'll have to discuss that further. I'm not sure because there's a lot to go in that long range plan and it takes a while. I can't do that in 3 weeks, but I know they're two separate projects.
Yep. Yeah, for the sake of the discussion on the stream bank project on Wisconsin and Kimberly, I would say they're completely separate. And yeah, perhaps we should have left out that other section of information. May have made it confusing. We don't need a vote or any agreement on the water quality treatment at Brady at this time because we don't even know when that may occur with the.
Okay, but if we vote on the one out there in Wisconsin, and then later come back and say, okay, well, we'd like this at the Armory, you're not gonna say, oh, nope, sorry, it's not gonna happen, or, I mean, it seems like they're tied together, but
You're wondering
they're
if there's
not.
consequences if we don't do this project later on, right?
Right.
What was that? I'm sorry.
If there's consequences later on if we don't do this project right now, are there consequences?
Oh, no, I don't think so. We want to use every penny we have available of these dollars to improve our water quality here. So if it's not at this one, we would not throw out Brady Street just because it didn't go through. It'd be disappointing, but we've got a lot of projects lined up in what we submitted. And so we're willing to go for any of those. We just like to take advantage of ones that can offer additional partnerships, which is why we started the discussion with facilities with the schools when we first submitted. It's because we like to.
So if we agree to this one out on Kimberly, we still could discuss 6 months from now the National Guard area, and that would still be a possibility for us.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Kent?
Well, not to throw some more things into the mix, but we're talking about 18 acres. Of course, there's a creek that cuts right through it, but the other option for the school district is to sell that and use it somewhere else in our budget. But I understand the value of having that as a from a teaching standpoint, as far as having kids go out there and look at it. So I think we have to weigh that also. But bottom line for me, I will not be in favor of the project until I know that the adjoining property owners have been contacted and they understand what's going on with the project.
Thank you. Director Hayes.
Before I could go further, I would really like to see number 6 revised to make sure that the district is not responsible for any of that. If the city's going to use it, that they're going to cover all costs.
Yep.
Director Snyder.
Yeah, I think this is a good partnership for the city and for the district. And if it gives our kids an educational opportunity, as long as it doesn't affect the farming and the neighboring properties, as well as affect or have any effects, on erosion or other types of other runoff issues, then I'm all for it as well.
Director Potts.
The county has a agricultural land use policy about not having prime farmland converted, correct? Does these 21 acres fall under that category, do you know, or are they outside of that?
I'd have to do some homework on that. I know they do have some agricultural protections that are primarily within the county outside of the city jurisdictions, because I think long-term planning from the municipality's perspective does have some of those areas in the future zoned differently. So there may be some overlap on that fringe, but I would have to check, but I can find out.
The only reason I ask, I'm okay with the project, but I don't want to find out or have you find out halfway through that the county had to issue a variance for you to take this agricultural land out of agricultural production.
Sure.
Director Beck?
I would say anything that's designed to improve water quality and conserve the watershed is something that I'm going to be in favor of. It's a win-win if we can add an educational component to it. But I do think it's important that we let the neighbors know and that we make sure that the primary goal of this project then is conservation and protection, and that we write that in somehow.
Thank you. Superintendent Schneckloff, you had something?
Yes, I want to, and many of you have the historical knowledge of our long-range facility plan brought forth. You guys had wonderful, great discussions about what should be on there, voted on, and we move forward. And so I think this discussion brings up a very valid point. And one, Amy, I want to thank you so much for being here, spending the time, bringing your expertise, because you really helped bridge a gap. There's quite a few new people here. And one of the things that I think will be really critical is we have paused a lot of our spending in the current time that we have. And that allows us to build new budgets as we move forward. This was an agreement that we had with the city. One of the things that we have to maintain is keeping our agreements, but how do we move forward with the direction that we're heading now? So it's going to be vital that we bring that long-range facility plan here before the school board to have discussions on and then be voted on, and then remember that that's the direction that we're heading. There was lots of discussions that many of you remember about the National Guard and moving and selling properties and things of that nature. So it's not something that is sneaking up on anybody. And that's a good reminder that we need to continue to bridge gaps with information. The way we onboard our board members would be pretty critical about, hey, here are the projects, the list of projects. So that's something that, as I'm listening, that's pretty important to know that at one time there was a conversation that if we do move down to the Iowa National Guard area facility, can we use those point? In my mind, I see them as points. Yeah. So you, Amy, you correct me when I'm finished, but that'll allow us when we're building that project to really stay within what's healthy for Scott County. And one of the things that's going to be very important, and I'm going to continue to reiterate, is that we continue to onboard and update that long-range facility plan. We have began to have conversations about that, but that's all that's happened. And so that's a huge next step for our district, and that's a conversation that's been had. And I just kind of wanted to reiterate where we've been with that and where we're going, and that absolutely was a project that was on our long-range facility plan. And so that needs to be updated. So I can definitely get information about that. Josh, one question. Do we own that entire farm ground there that the baseball diamond's on?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
All right. I'm in support of this as well. I do agree that the adjoining property owners should probably be contacted. They should be contacted so they know what's going on as well. Does anybody have anything else? Seeing none, we appreciate you spending all your time here. Hopefully the mayor compensates you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Next discussion item is policies. Director Beck, you're up.
Okay, I'll try and make this as quick as possible. Let's see. I don't know if it's possible for me to share my screen. but you guys have in front of you a couple of documents. And the first one is, Joe, is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yes, there should be an icon that looks like a computer monitor at the bottom.
Ah, okay. Thank you. I see it now. All right, so let me find my document here. Okay, can you guys see this Word document?
Yes.
Okay. All right, awesome. Okay, so this is a memo that we put together as a policy committee. And as a policy committee, we discussed sort of the best way to go about converting our policies to a standard format that fits with what the rest of the state is doing and also takes advantage of the research that the IASB does. And so I know I've talked previously about how we wanted to basically convert our numbering system to the IASB numbering system. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, it will make it easier for the public and for people in our district to find policies because the numbering will be consistent with other districts. And number two, anytime an update comes from the IASB, it has a number on it and it's easy to slip it into the right place if we have the same numbering system. So a couple of reasons for that. So what we did, we had originally sort of started going through bit by bit and realized that that wasn't the most efficient way to do this. So in this memo, basically the goal is for us to present to you a segment of policies at each regular meeting, and we will discuss them. If you have any questions, you can ask them. And then towards the end of the academic year, we will wholesale adopt the IASB numbering system and policy titles. And that way we won't be leaving anything out. We won't be forgetting anything, and we won't be throwing an entire policy manual at you and at the public at once. So the first segment we did was the 100 series, which we've kind of had to talk about piecemeal because a lot of those were mandatory policies that we had to get updated right away. So that's why you're being presented with the 200 series tonight. And basically what the policy committee wants you guys to know is that you'll be presented with this document, a document just like I'm showing you right now, and it'll be your job to look through the IASB policy number, and I'll show you the document where you can find that. And if you want, compare it to what we currently have. Now, each of these IASB policies here has to be customized to meet our needs, putting in our name, who things report to, that type of thing. But what the policy committee is doing is putting together a cross-reference so that you can see exactly what language we currently have in place if you want to look at that. And that way, we'll have the ability to discuss this at our regular meetings, but we won't have to take an hour or two to go through each one of these word by word. And so each regular meeting, you can expect to get a table, something like this, that has the new policy manual. We'll have these policies with some minor exceptions. For example, we have a secretary treasurer, so we will not have two separate policies there. And if you want to know what our current language is, you can look at the Davenport policy number or see if it's missing. If there is a blank space here, it's because in the IASB manual, it's typically a heading of some sort, so there's not actually a policy associated with it. So that's basically what we're doing. And that way we thought everybody will get this package before the meeting. You guys will have a chance to look through. As a policy committee, it's our job to go through these IASB policies in detail and make sure that they meet our needs. And then as a board, we can all decide together or review together what the current policy language is. But I don't have to go through it piece by piece every policy, every meeting. And then I just wanted to point out at the bottom, I'll have this anytime it applies. We have policies that the IASB does not have. For example, our policy on collective bargaining negotiations, which we will keep, but we will add them to this series upon their adoption because that's where they would fit. Okay, so that is basically the first document. The second document is the document that Mary sent, and I apologize, I've got to find it here. It's hard for me to do this without multiple windows. And that has the list of all of the IASB policies with some notes in it that we did at the policy committee meeting. So let me share my screen again. Okay, can you guys see the IASB Series 200 document that I'm showing? It says organizational meeting procedures. Okay.
Yes, we can see that.
So, okay, good, thank you. It keeps going away from me. All right. What you will get in your board packet each week is essentially a document with all of these IASB policies with any notes that we've put in. So for example, there's an organizational meeting procedures document, but their list of items or events that occur during a meeting are not necessarily the same as what we do. So we would just list our past practice and insert positions, titles, and things like that. I also wanted to make a note that the IASB uses a numbering system where if they have sort of a sub policy, they call it an R or regulation. So you can see that policy 200.1 is the organization of the board of directors. When there's a 1 and a 2 here, we get to choose which one fits us best and tailor it. And then R1 is essentially a sub-policy. And at a later point, we can decide if we want to keep this practice or if we would like to just include it all in one policy number. But that's not something that we felt like it was important to figure out right this moment. So that is sort of the first part of this. I'm going to stop presenting and open up this to any questions. I'm hoping I explained well what we're doing, but if anybody has any questions about how we're going to go about presenting these to you guys, I'd be happy to entertain them. And I'm going to delegate calling on people to President Goza since I can't see people.
Director Klein Jerome.
Director Beck, is there any way we can get these? I don't want to get this Friday to have to discuss Monday. I'm one who thoroughly reads everything, and that just was not enough time for me to look through this. So I would just like some more time.
Yep, and that actually was initially our plan. We sort of came to this, sort of finally figured out the best way to go about doing this, and we wanted to make sure we presented to you guys what the procedure was going to be before we waited another meeting. But the nice thing about this is we do have plenty of time. If you do have questions between now and whenever we're ready to adopt the policy manual, we won't be voting on these till we're done with all of the discussions, right? So for example, the question you asked last meeting about who we release records to, we're still trying to figure out that information. But since we don't need to vote on it right now, we have some time to figure that out. So yes, I'm happy to, in the future, try and make sure that we get these out to you in a more timely manner, or to bring them back up for a second discussion is fine as well.
Thank you.
Director Snyder.
One of the big advantages to going to the IASB policy manual, as Director Beck stated, is just easy access, so our numbers align with theirs. If you look in a lot of other school districts, in fact, almost every other school district around us, they use the IASB policies as well. So it's easier for people to find them. Plus, when you think about it, it's just downright common sense. I mean, we pay IASB membership dues, and that's part of what we're paying for, is for access to those policies. They have a team of people, they run them through their legal. When there's updates, they notify us. They do a lot of the homework for us. When it's code, when laws change, they're on it. I mean, they have the capability to get on these quicker than we do. So it just makes sense as a district to let somebody in that position kind of handle this for us. So it's just kind of some clarity as to, another reason why we want to move in that direction.
I don't see anyone else.
Okay. So if, what I'll do is make sure that we try and allow a little bit more time for these. As Director Klein-Jerome pointed out, it is a lot of information. But now that we have the system in place, everybody kind of knows what to expect and how to read that document. The other nice thing is that the public can see that document, that table, so they know exactly what we're going to be doing and what currently we say. So the second thing that we do need to discuss tonight is policy 907, and that is on district operations in an emergency. And so we have, it's 907 now because we're using Davenport numbers until we switch over completely. But this is a policy that came out from IASB, essentially replacing the resolution that we passed earlier. And I know Director Klein-Jerome, you brought up the resolution. We would like to put a policy in place before we rescind the resolution. That's what the policy committee thought would be the best option to make sure that we're not leaving out, we don't have a gap in authority. And so with this public emergencies policy, essentially the language is pretty standard. We have a couple of things that we do need to discuss and make a decision on. We're not voting on it tonight. But in this first part here, basically the idea is who is going to determine whether to close school buildings to traditional in-person learning. And you may have noticed that on the news, sometimes you hear about other school districts voting to do that, or school boards voting to do that. Some do, some don't. So what we need feedback on as a policy committee is the two sections in italics here. So the first one, it says that the school board delegates to the superintendent the authority to determine this information, or to determine whether buildings are closed. So whether we're 100% online or hybrid or whatever the case may be. The other option is that the school board determines, but it's based upon the recommendation of the superintendent. And at this time, I'd actually like to pass this over to Interim Superintendent Schneckloff to explain sort of the difference here and the one that he thought was the best option for us.
Well, I think everyone's pretty familiar with the top one because that's kind of the process that we went through in a couple of weeks ago. But the bottom one would be very similar to some of the actions that we've needed to take place, where we would call an emergency meeting, call a meeting, give the appropriate notice, come together and make that decision. Again, I'm fine either way that these things, I'm fine either one that the district chooses. The bottom one would be new for us right now. And I know that the board wants to have input on those things. And so the process that we would utilize would be, we would begin to collect our data, look at our staff numbers, and then if the decision was there that we would make a recommendation to the school board, then we would put that in front of you in a timely fashion, still complying with all of the rules that we have to bring the board together. So those are that's what we kind of discussed in our policy committee, and both of those things are something that we're familiar with. Unfortunately, calling meetings at a time like that, and that's something that you as board members are familiar with. And so, Dr. Beck, I believe that's the conversation that we have. And again, you know, this is a very difficult time, and those decisions are very difficult. So I'm very just in terms of from the superintendent's chair, I'm very comfortable with either one of those positions.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or thoughts on this? Again, we're not voting on this tonight. It's our first hearing.
Director Potts?
Yeah, I would just ask, if we were to change, because currently we're under the policy that the superintendent can make this decision. If we change to the one where the board makes this decision, does that solely apply to our current circumstances with the COVID-19 pandemic? And does it then leave in place those other options a superintendent has to close a particular school or a couple of schools based on other circumstances? Power failure, water failure, roof collapse, snow. I mean, I don't think we want to have an emergency board meeting to decide to close it. I don't want to have to vote on that. We can't win.
That's an excellent question. No, this pertains only to public emergencies. So there's a specific description of a public emergency that's been declared. You can see it up here at the top. At times of a public emergency declared by federal, state, or local officials. So it doesn't do anything about snow days or power outages or anything like that. It has to be, a public emergency declared by officials in that official capacity.
There are no other hands up, Director Beck. Oh, wait, Director Snyder.
Okay.
The policy committee kind of needs a consensus on which way we want to go so that we can word the policy kind of in the direction so that we can vote on it. So we kind of need an idea because basically what would happen is one of those options then would be left out and the other one then would become the policy. So we kind of need a consensus on which way the board wants to go.
And that was my question. Do you want us to kind of state where our position is at this time?
If you're comfortable with that, that would be great. We can't vote on it tonight, so if you feel like you need a little bit more time, that's fine. If you have a general idea right now, we'd be happy to hear it. Basically, the practice is not that different. The difference is that we would have to have potentially a meeting if we vote based upon the recommendation of the superintendent. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to come together in person to have a meeting. It can be, a quick meeting online to make a decision like this. And of course, we also don't expect this to happen frequently, right? Public emergencies are not theoretically regular happenings. So if you have some idea, maybe Director Snyder can kind of go around and see if anybody has an opinion one way or the other right now. We do still have to bring this back for discussion one more time.
My opinion, I would like the second one. I would like the board to make this decision.
Okay.
Director Poston, where are you at with this?
I could go either way. I guess I'd take the second one.
Director Hayes?
I'm actually either way, but I like the first one for the simple fact, if it's an emergency, how do we get everyone together right away? How is that information relayed? So I'm comfortable allowing the superintendent or delegating that authority, but I could easily go either way.
Director Potts?
I think what Linda says, an emergency is an emergency, whereas we have to post 24 hours ahead that we're going to have a meeting to decide on an emergency.
Actually,
I don't think
let me
we do.
speak to that. There's a policy that states that in an emergency, you can suspend the 24-hour notice as long as you make, the goal is to make every effort to post in advance, but there is a policy in the 200 series that says you can have a meeting without 24-hour notice if there are extenuating and extreme circumstances. So this would qualify.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yep, we just found that out too.
Which one are you good with, the first one or the second one?
I think I still prefer the first one.
Okay. Director Snyder?
I prefer the second one because again, these are usually, or not usually, but in this instance, it's a debatable type of decision. And I think by making it a board decision based on an administrative recommendation, that we take some of that weight off of the superintendent's shoulders, that I can only assume is not wanted weight. And I think it's a decision that does affect the entire district, and I don't think it's a bad thing that we share in that.
Director Beck, where are you at?
I'm actually along the same lines as Director Snyder. I think I like and Director Klein-Jerome, I like the second option because I think I don't expect that the board would ever necessarily override a recommendation by the superintendent, but it does sort of make it it's not on just one person's shoulders to make this decision. And they're never easy decisions. So I like number 2. How about you?
I am for number 2 as well.
Okay, good. So the last thing is that there is a sub-policy for this, a regulation that applies specifically to public health emergencies, so like our current situation. So public emergency that we just discussed could be, you know, a huge storm comes through and destroys half the district or something like that. This is specifically public health emergency. And I'll be honest, the policy committee did not have a chance to discuss this regulation. But basically, all of the language, I believe all of the language except for this part here that starts with employees is pretty standard. The second part here basically is about asking people to take their temperatures, and then if extra cleaning is required, then basically the district has the right to either refuse the use or restrict the use of school buildings and facilities, or ask them to pay for the use of those school buildings and facilities, non-district groups, so just community groups, if there's cost associated with cleaning, or, for example, cleaning supplies are in short supply or something like that. So here we would need some feedback on would we want to be able to restrict the use of the school buildings, or would we want the ability to require reimbursement for that use in the event of extra cleaning? And I'll be honest, I'd like to take a little bit more time with this one since the policy committee didn't really get a chance to talk about it. But if anybody has any thoughts on it right now, I'll entertain them. I'll let Director Gosa call on people. if there is anyone.
Director Klein Jerome.
On this one, I like the first one. What a hassle it would be to the district to have to say, is this EPA approved cleaning products and disinfectant? And you've got to pay. And I think we should just give the discretion to saying, you're just not going to use the building. This is just too much of a hassle to have to follow all these mitigation things from outside groups.
Okay.
Director Snyder.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think trying to figure out who's going to be responsible to pay would just be a huge nightmare. You know, and then as far as not using the buildings, I think it would have to be kind of a situation by situation thing. Because, I mean, it is important to remember that our school buildings are kind of like the epicenter of our community. So I wouldn't want to just absolutely shut them off, because that's, I think, an important, I mean, that's why those buildings are there.
Superintendent Schneckloff.
We're right now, Allison, I know we haven't had a lot of time to discuss this at our policy committee meeting, but we're navigating this as we speak, and doing it. And I love the language there, neutral and non-discriminatory manner. So I think at our next policy committee, we can discuss how we're navigating that right now. You know, there's lots of conversations around, there's students that are in our building that are in our own feeder programs that are next to each other in class. And so those conversations, is it okay if they stick around after school and do whatever? So those are the conversations that we're having all the way up to some of the partnerships that we have in our community. So
Okay.
I wanted to go, can I go one more?
Go ahead.
Bruce, back to your point of, I'm sorry, I'll try and get a little closer if that's better. To your point of an emergency, say if we did need to close a building, and I need to dig into the policy and procedure more, but I believe that I have 48 hours to shut a building down and then apply for the waiver, and that gives us the time to bring the board back and have a conversation, but it allows us to stop if something is, and so I need to dig into that a little bit more. I think that's a conversation that we can have, because that still gives us a little bit of freedom to apply for that waiver for an extended period of time and keep the building safe. And so there's different avenues inside of that.
Director Potts had something.
I was just going to say, I agree with Director Klein Jerome on this business of building use.
Director Beck.
I was just going to say that I believe Interim Superintendent Schneckloff is correct that currently, under the current resolution from the government, he does have the power to apply for a waiver 48 hours after, or within 48 hours of making a determination to close a building or buildings, and that may change depending on, you know, who's governor and what the situation is. But generally speaking, these are designed for flexibility, but the ability to deal with an emergency in sort of a consistent manner. As for the second one here, I'm also in agreement with Director Klein Jerome that it would be a huge hassle to try and figure out who is responsible for how much. And so I'm looking forward to having a conversation with the policy committee about how we make those decisions. But I agree, it's got to be in a neutral and non-discriminatory manner.
So did you get whatever info you needed, Director Beck, or did you need each person to say if they wanted the first or the second?
If Director Postgen and Director Hayes could just give me an idea, and you could give me an idea of what you're thinking in terms of this last one here, which one you would prefer, and then the policy committee can shore it up at our next meeting.
Okay, Director Hayes?
I agree with Director Klein Jerome. It would be a hassle.
Director Postgen?
Agree.
I agree with the first one as well.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Is that all you had for policies?
I believe so. I tried to stop sharing. I hope it stopped sharing. My internet's a little slow. And I can't get the page to load right now, so I don't think there's anything else on the policy agenda, but you'll have to,
I'm
Let me
not
know.
seeing anything else. So
Okay.
with that being said, I'll move on to board requests. Right now I have one. Does anybody have any for me?
Can I say one thing real quick?
Oh, go ahead. As long as it
Alice-
pertains to the subject we're talking
It is. Allison had said that, the policy committee had put that sheet together. Well, she's being a little modest. She put that sheet together, and that is a tremendous amount of work. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knows how much effort she put into that. And that was not a policy committee thing. That was work done by her. So,
I second that, and that's really going to help move us forward.
yeah.
So.
All right. Thank you for all your hard work, and that's a great Christmas sweatshirt too. I like it.
Thank you. It was a gift from my family a couple years ago.
Oh,
I would also like to mention that this may be the first time someone has attended a school board meeting from another country.
A.
A.
All right. Board requests. Did anybody have any? I only have one. Going once, going twice. Board request from Director Poshin dated today. It's for an agenda item. Start an immediate search discussion for superintendent. Why are you making this request? Try to have a superintendent in place by March 1. When would you like this? Next meeting. Is there a second?
Second.
Huh? All right, so
Either way.
we got multiple seconds.
Yep.
We'll go with Potts on that one.
Could I just ask a question? Isn't TJ's time till the end of March? I mean, so are we looking more at the 1st of April? I thought that 6 months went to the end of March.
I think we build in a transition period typically if we need it.
Well, this is all assuming that the state's gonna,
Let it go at 6 months.
Right.
Yes.
what's that old country song? Please release me, let me go, for we don't love you anymore.
And we are good as far as the superintendent front goes for right now, with TJ being the interim superintendent, so everyone knows that. Are there any administrative reports? No administrative reports. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
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 All right. Meeting adjourned.